Chapter 1195. Now Wang Ling finally realized the mistake he had been making all this time. Although Wang Ling had already realized through Wang Ming's dream that the person behind the scenes might be related to him in some way, he had been thinking about his parallel universe self, and had neglected the clue right in front of him. That was his shadow. To be exact, this was a shadow that had been separated from his shadow. The other party was very smart. In order to prevent Wang Ling from noticing any flaws, he had deliberately left a small portion of his shadow's power to confuse Wang Ling, so that Wang Ling wouldn't notice the shadow that had been following him all this time. During this time, the other party had been constantly improving his cultivation, and had relied on a big fish devouring small fish method to strengthen himself by continuously devouring other people's shadows. That strange resurrection spell had probably been prepared for this devouring. Wang Ling hadn't expected that even though he had been so cautious, he would actually still be tricked by his own shadow. Since it was his own shadow, Wang Ling immediately decided to give Bai Qi a name. Wang Ying. It sounded like a good name. Humph. Don't give me a random name. On the other side, White Hair heard Wang Ling's thoughts and immediately snorted angrily. He knew that at the same level, neither of them should be able to do anything to the other. That was to say, if Wang Ling hadn't deliberately exposed a flaw in his mind, White Hair wouldn't have been able to hear his inner voice at all. Thus, Wang Ying immediately understood that Wang Ling had done it on purpose to let him hear this name. What a despicable guy. Did he think that by giving him such a name, he would be able to make him submit? From the moment he had been separated from Wang Ling's body, Wang Ying had already sworn that he would never become anyone's accessory in this lifetime. He was unique. Wang Ling had never thought that one day he would actually fight with his own shadow. This feeling was similar to the left and right mutual combat in wuxia novels, and was very wonderful. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to call it an advanced version. Should he use a sealing spell? At that moment, Wang Ling stared at Wang Ying as he thought of a way to deal with him. If he fought with Wang Ying, the other party might also use the same trick. If they fought in front of the sun and damaged the spirit of the sun, it would be a fatal blow to the Earth's environment. So Wang Ling was thinking of using a high-level sealing spell to seal Wang Ying. This was the most gentle method he could think of. But of course, even if Zhang Xian were to use sealing arts, ordinary Heaven's Path divine arts wouldn't work either. Wang Ying knew all of his abilities. No matter what move he used, Wang Ying would perfectly replicate it. Thus this duel was a brainstorm. In the course of the duel, Wang Ling had to use the abilities he had at his disposal to rearrange them, and develop a new ability to deal with Wang Ying. It was just like permutations and combinations in mathematics. 4 identical numbers would become brand new numbers after being rearranged and rearranged. What Wang Ling needed to do was to use the new spells he was constantly developing to win. Wang Ling had made up these spells on the spot. Even if Wang Ying knew what kind of ability they were based on, there was no way he could replicate them instantly. There was also a calculation process involved. He planned to take advantage of the time difference to defeat Wang Ying. What? You want to defeat me by designing spells on the spot? Contrary to Wang Ling's expectations, his plan, which he thought would work, was instantly foiled by Wang Ying on the other side. Wang Ling was well aware that this definitely wasn't the ability of the mind-reading ability. Unless they deliberately revealed a flaw, neither of them would be able to read each other's minds. You underestimate me, Wang Ling. I was separated from you. Even if I can't use the mind-reading ability to read your mind, based on my understanding of you, I can still predict what you're thinking. Standing in front of him, Wang Ying's expression was a little bitter, and even a little self-deprecating. Have you forgotten? Countless nights, while you were learning, I was also growing up with you. I know all of your habits like the back of my hand. Wang Ling's pupils contracted slightly at these words. At the same time, Wang Ling felt that he had indeed underestimated Wang Ying. When all was said and done, Wang Ying was something that had been separated from him. Not only did he have spiritual intelligence, he also had all of his abilities. He was indeed very different from his previous opponents who only knew a few half-baked skills. This was perhaps the first person Wang Ling had met who couldn't be directly defeated with a single slap. But in the next moment, looking at the youngster in front of him, Wang Ling sighed. Following this sigh, Wang Ying suddenly felt the space within a radius of 10,000 feet around him start to shake. A sealing array? How did he do it? Wang Ying was caught off guard by Wang Ling stealthily setting up an array. He tried hard to predict Wang Ling's array, but he couldn't tell what kind of ability it was using. Apart from that sigh at the very beginning, Wang Ling didn't move at all. He just stood there without making any hand seals, and there weren't even any fluctuations of spirit power emanating from his body. But this array had been set up just like that. It was a brand new array. At least in Wang Ying's memory as a shadow, he had never seen such an array. In a split second, the surface of the blazing sun was divided into a square chessboard. Countless stars gathered and moved like chess pieces on the chessboard, and the center of the chessboard was clearly divided into two spaces, one yin and one yang. Standing where yin and yang met, Wang Ling didn't even bat an eyelid. The chess pieces above the chessboard, which had been arranged from the stars, rumbled and exploded, and one by one, they actually moved in Wang Ying's direction. This was a new move that Wang Ling had developed by combining a variety of spells. When the chess pieces collided with each other, the target that was hit would instantly be sealed. The power of this move was already comparable to that of a level 14 spell. It was extraordinarily powerful. However, just as the chess piece was about to hit Wang Ying, the chess piece that was originally moving at an extremely fast speed suddenly stopped. A chessboard that was also 10,000 feet wide formed under Wang Ying's feet. Wang Ling felt a force resisting him, and his chess piece was forced to stop moving. Heavenly Dao chessboard plus star shifting array plus all creation dust. Although it had taken some time to calculate, Wang Ying had in the end figured out the formula for this brand new sealing spell. Wang Ling hadn't expected such a quick calculation. It looked like a simple combination wouldn't fool Wang Ying. He had to design some more complicated spells. Chapter 1196. He combined the Heavenly Dao chessboard, the star-shifting array and the 10,000 forms dust to form a new level 14 sealing spell, which Wang Ling called Heavenly Dust Star-Shifting Chess. When the chess pieces collided and hit their target, the power of the seal, which was formed by the coexistence of yin and yang, was enough to crush any living creature in the solar system. However, this simple arrangement clearly didn't work on Wang Ying. The other party's calculation speed was far faster than Wang Ling had imagined. But the battle had just begun, and Wang Ling wasn't flustered by his failure. Given that he possessed a variety of great Dao powers, he had enough confidence in any battle. The most important thing was that this duel with Wang Ying would take place in outer space. They would be fighting far away from Earth, and even if they went all out, they wouldn't harm the innocent. It was precisely because of this that Wang Ling was exceptionally patient. Since Wang Ying had been separated from his body, Wang Ling felt that it was necessary to use this battle to clearly investigate the cause of Wang Ying's formation. All this time, Wang Ling had neglected his own shadow. He had never thought that his shadow would actually grow up with him, gradually develop spiritual intelligence, and even have the thought of separating from his body. Wang Ling, you'd better not underestimate my deductive ability. There may not be an obvious difference between you and me, but my calculation is definitely above yours. Wang Ling's expression froze slightly at Wang Ying's words. He was wondering if there was any difference between him and Wang Ying apart from the color of their hair. As for his mathematical ability, Wang Ling didn't think he was too bad at it. At the very least, he had a clear idea of how to solve problems, and could come up with dozens of different solutions in 1 second. For Wang Ling, the only difficulty was how to make his mistakes less obvious when answering the questions. As for Wang Ying's claim that his calculation ability was above his, Wang Ling put on an expression that said he was eager to hear the details. The next second, Wang Ling heard Wang Ying's sole question. Wang Ling, let me ask you, do you know how many crispy noodle snacks you've eaten until today? To be honest, Wang Ling was stunned by this question, because no one would deliberately calculate how many crispy noodle snacks they had eaten. I've already expected you to use this method of rearranging spells to deal with me, so I've been training my calculation ability and patience since a long time ago. I clearly remember every crispy noodle snack you've eaten. Wang Ying's gaze revealed a determined look. You are 16 years old this year. You ate a total of 36,872 packets of crispy noodle snacks. On average, you have to eat 6 packets a day. Sometimes, you have to eat 20 packets a day. Wang Ling. Do you know Wang Ling? Wang Ying smiled bitterly. I know you better than you do. Wang Ling was silent. He was indeed speechless. At first, he thought that his shadow was just a repeater that had all the abilities he knew. But he never expected that Wang Ying was not only a repeater, but also the legendary Lord Counter. But thanks to Wang Ying, he finally knew how many packets of crispy noodle snacks he had eaten. Opponents usually die from talking too much. During Wang Ying's nagging, Wang Ling had already figured out a new way to attack. He knew that the ultimate goal of Wang Ying's incessant chatter in front of him was to stall for time, so that the plenitude elephant's pillar would have enough time to extract the spirit power of the sun spirit. But Wang Ying no longer had a chance. His next move would definitely determine his victory. All along, many people had been pursuing the power of Great Tao. This so-called power of Great Tao was the supreme magical power that could reach heaven and earth. Take Heavenly Tao, for example. There were 3,000 Heavenly Tao in a universe, and they were combined into the 3,000 Heavenly Tao. Many cultivators on Earth might only be able to comprehend one of the 3,000 Heavenly Tao after searching for hundreds, or even thousands of years. A large part of the reason why the power of Tao was so difficult to reach was that Tao contained an ever-changing power, just like the genetic sequences in the evolutionary process of living things, which had trillions of permutations and combinations. Only through constant learning, and combined with a certain amount of luck, could one have the opportunity to combine the genetic sequences of the 3,000 Heavenly Tao. And this process could take a cultivator a very long time. The next moment, Wang Ling attacked again. Like before, he didn't make any hand seals, nor did his body move much. It was yet another flawless execution of the sealing technique. The confusing effect of the sealing technique was excellent. This was because the opponent would never know when the attack would begin, and wouldn't even be able to see through the other party's hand seals to see what kind of technique he was using. Wang Ying narrowed his eyes and did his best to distinguish Wang Ling's technique. He was observing Wang Ling's micro-expressions, and based on his familiarity with Wang Ling, he was able to predict his next move. Facial paralysis was also capable of micro-expressions. Sometimes, even a tiny blink of the eye could contain a huge amount of information. Wang Ling was still inspired by the stars in the universe for this move, but he had fused far more spells than the first time. He had only fused 3 moves the first time, but in the end, Wang Ying had swiftly deduced everything. This time, Wang Ling didn't believe that Wang Ying would be able to see through the 30 moves he had fused together so quickly. When Wang Ying was surrounded by thousands of meteorites, he felt as if his body had become the center of gravity. Each of these meteorites fluttering in the sky was like a magnet as they rushed toward him in an endless stream. As Wang Ying did his best to escape the gravitational pull of the meteorites, he wondered what kind of spell Wang Ling was using. In less than a few seconds, Wang Ying actually felt his body become heavier and heavier. If this went on, he would definitely lose this battle. When the thousands of meteorites crashed into him like a tidal wave, Wang Ying gradually became lost in them, and finally sank into oblivion. Did it work? Wang Ling stared at the scene in front of him. He saw that Wang Ying had already been completely buried. This was a new grade 15 spell that he had come up with. It could transform any living creature into a star core. Once the transformation was complete, all the meteorites in the universe would approach the star core and converge into a sphere, which would grow bigger and bigger under the influence of the endless gravitational pull, like a greedy snake. The most important thing was that as the meteorites converged and grew in size, the person who had been transformed into the star core would also be under the same pressure. In the end, they would completely turn into a whole new planet and be trapped inside it forever. Looking at the result, Wang Ying was probably trapped. Was that all there was to it? Wang Ling sighed in his heart as he stared at the brand new planet that had been formed from an endless stream of meteorites. But in the next moment, the sphere, which had originally been motionless in front of him, suddenly split open at the top with a loud boom. Wang Ling, I won't be abandoned by you again. Wang Ying's voice came out of the crack. I've been your shadow for so long. This time, I'm going to turn you into my shadow forever. Chapter 1197. Wang Ying's strength was astonishing. At least, it was far more terrifying than Wang Ling had imagined. With his own strength, he had broken free of the star core and carved out a bloody path while surrounded by so many meteorites, seeking a slim chance of survival. There were no words to describe or evaluate this kind of technique that relied purely on physical strength, because it didn't require any skill at all. Wang Ling didn't make a move, but waited for the other party's next move. The scene seemed to be in a stalemate. If anyone had been watching, they would definitely have huge doubts about the outcome of the battle. This kind of doubt was as thought-provoking as why Kuxuan was so short. On the other side, Wang Ying, who had broken free by relying purely on his physical strength, was surrounded by several layers of faint black light. This was the holy body halo of a sage. Wang Ling's halo was pure white, which was the complete opposite of Wang Ying's. When the holy body halo circled around Wang Ying like a star ring, the meteorites within 100 zhang of Wang Ying were actually attracted by the power of the holy body halo, and then split apart little by little until they were completely shattered. This was the invulnerability circle brought about by the holy body halo. It could automatically clear away all flying objects, hidden weapons, spells and so on within a range of 100 zhang. Wang Ling had always been suppressing his holy body halo to prevent it from showing. Because if he lost control of his halo, it wouldn't just be clearing away flying objects, but also erasing all living things in the surrounding space. Even for the current Wang Ying, he was holding back on his halo, opening it to less than 10%. This was because he still had to take care of the myriad elephants pillar below him. Once it was completely open to 100%, a large chunk of the myriad elephants pillar below, and the surface of the sun would immediately be bitten off and directly disappear from space. It could only be said that as expected of his own shadow. Looking at this scene, Wang Ling's eyes were unexpectedly filled with pleasant surprise. It had been a long time since he had met someone who could take a beating like this. Wang Ying had replicated almost all of his heavenly Dao abilities. But from Wang Ying's attack just now, Wang Ling could actually see some drawbacks. Almost all the spells he had created previously had been based on heavenly Dao. Assuming that Wang Ying had been separated from Wang Ling a long time ago, Wang Ying might not have been able to master the new abilities he had obtained after separation. Although he had very cautiously left a small part of his shadow on Wang Ling to prevent Wang Ling from noticing it was missing, there was a limit to how much it could learn. Thus, based on this scenario, Wang Ling felt that the opportunity to clinch victory had arrived. As long as he used the power of the divine Dao, he might be able to make Wang Ying reveal a flaw. However, at that moment, a sly smile appeared on Wang Ying's face. He opened his hand, and a long string of black shadows condensed in his palm. In the end, they gradually solidified. First, they revealed a pitch-black sword hilt, and then they slowly materialized into a sword god. The sword was black all over, but despite the difference in color, Wang Ling could still tell at a glance that it was Jinka's shadow. Not only had Wang Ying escaped from him, it had actually stolen Jinka's shadow along with it. What a beast! But at that moment, staring at the rampant Wang Ying in front of him, Wang Ling actually secretly rejoiced. He thought to himself that it was a good thing that the opponent hadn't attacked Crispy Noodles' shadow. If even the shadow of the Crispy Noodle snack was stolen, then the Crispy Noodle snack would no longer be complete. Wang Ling, I know what you're thinking. I know you're thinking about using the divine Dao to deal with me. But unfortunately, I'm afraid your wish will come to nothing. Indeed, I haven't fully mastered the power of the divine Dao. But you must always remember that I'm your shadow. Wang Ying's voice rang out. Shadows exist to imitate. If you dare use the divine Dao, I'll be able to learn it in an instant. At that time, I'll become even stronger. Saying this, Wang Ying pointed that pitch-black Jinka straight at Wang Ling. I told you, I want you to become my shadow. Shadow counterattack. Wang Ying definitely wasn't just saying this. Wang Ling could sense that Wang Ying was serious. In fact, this was also a gamble for Wang Ying. He had paid such a huge price to set up the universe refining array in an attempt to absorb the power of all the living beings in the entire solar system, in order to have enough power to fight Wang Ling. That was right. So Wang Ying's ultimate goal was to counterattack. He wanted Wang Ling to devour him, and thus become his shadow. Now there was still one crucial step to complete this plan, and that was to wait until the myriad elephant's pillar had absorbed enough power from the sun spirit. Wang Ying had once imagined what kind of attitude and expression he would show when he saw Wang Ling. In the end, it turned out that Wang Ying was even more excited than he had imagined. He already couldn't wait for the myriad elephant's pillar to absorb enough energy, as his entire body was already boiling over. According to his original plan, if he used the universe refining array, his success rate in devouring Wang Ling would be 99%. Although his current success rate wasn't that high, it was still at least 80%. Thus, Wang Ying decided to give it a try first to see if he could devour Wang Ling. With a frivolous laugh, Wang Ying swung his black sword at Wang Ling. At first, Wang Ying only created a small sword wave when he waved his sword. However, the moment this sword wave was pushed out, it instantly expanded like a surging tsunami, forming a huge sword wave that was tens of thousands of feet wide. The wild sword chi caused Wang Ling's figure to sway slightly. Wang Ling started to rejoice that he had had the foresight to enchant his school uniform and pants before he had set off. Otherwise, under the power of this sword, all his clothes would have been stripped bare. Do you think it's over just like that? I didn't even use 10% of my strength in that attack just now. Wang Ying was especially confident in his attack. He quickly changed his position, and each time he did, he slashed at Wang Ling with his sword. Huge sword waves from all directions rushed toward Wang Ling, who was in the center, forming a huge convection that seemed to trap Wang Ling in the middle and prevent him from moving. This power was indeed astonishing. Wang Ling was already certain that less than 10% of his strength could have such an effect. But in the center of the sword chi, Wang Ling stretched his muscles and bones. 10% of the sword chi was still a little too weak. There was no way it could trap him. Seeing this, Wang Ying reacted quickly and launched a second round of attacks. To devour Wang Ling, he had to first imprison him, just like a giant python swallowing its prey. The prey had to give up struggling for a short while, thus leaving enough time for the shadow to devour. 100% sword Dao. This time, Wang Ying didn't hold back. He had wanted to save some energy for when he devoured Wang Ling. But now he had decided to show off. He would reserve his strength to immobilize Wang Ling first. The sword pressure created by the 100% power of the sword Dao was destructive. Any living creature trapped within would be torn to pieces. Only Wang Ling would be safe and sound. Is it already 100%? That's right. This was 100%. Awesome, right? However, after confirming that Wang Ying had used 100% of his sword principle, Wang Ling's face showed deep disappointment, and two words involuntarily popped up in his heart. That's it. Chapter 1198. Although Wang Ying relied on the characteristics of the shadow to imitate all of Wang Ling's abilities, there was a fundamental difference in their personalities. What Wang Ling felt most from this fight was Wang Ying's confidence, which he didn't know where it came from. Overconfidence in one's own strength would often cause one to fall into an unknown predicament. But while it wasn't enough for Wang Ling to use all of its strength as his own shadow, it was still stronger than most people on Earth. Wang Ying thought that his sword pressure had firmly suppressed Wang Ling, and his body immediately started to turn into a shadow as he tried to envelop and devour Wang Ling. Like a black hole, the huge black shadow turned into ferocious claws that lunged at Wang Ling to devour him. At this time, Wang Ying still did not realize that his situation was not good. During the fight, Wang Ying had kept his distance from Wang Ling the entire time, so that Wang Ling wouldn't have any chance to get close to him. He knew Wang Ling too well. If he got close, it might be easier for him to find an opportunity. At that moment, the devouring shadow rushed over from a distance and ruthlessly pounced on Wang Ling. Wang Ying was secretly delighted when he saw that Wang Ling couldn't even open his eyes under the enormous pressure of his sword. But in fact, the main reason he had closed his eyes was because he was accumulating power. The universe was vast. In the previous two duels, the main reason why Wang Ling had reorganized his spells and used them for long-range attacks was because Wang Ying had been cautious. In fact, He had thought of an excellent way to capture Wang Ying during the previous fight. However, due to the distance, he had to lure Wang Ying into his effective attack range. Just as the endless black shadows turned into a round black hole to swallow him, Wang Ling realized that his best chance to make a move had come. In the next moment, Wang Ling opened his eyes, and the three-petaled golden Tao lotus of the king's eye overflowed from his pupils, instantly creating a tremendous suppressive force. In an instant, everything in the universe seemed to be frozen at this moment. Even Wang Ying, who was trying to devour, could not move. At this moment, he saw an illusion of silence. At this moment, Wang Ying finally realized his mistake. He thought he had copied everything about Wang Ling. However, he had never possessed this pair of king's eyes. The king's eye couldn't be duplicated, unless he could personally pluck it out of Wang Ling. But this was easier said than done. What is this? Wang Ying was dumbfounded. The situation was beyond his expectations. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be anything in this world that couldn't be replicated as a shadow. Wang Ling knew that from the moment Wang Ying revealed this expression, the outcome had already been decided. His king's eye couldn't be replicated. Even Wang Ling himself felt it was very strange. This was because the king's eye wasn't part of Tao, and wasn't a derivative of any great Tao. It was something that Wang Ling was born with, but he didn't know where it had come from. It was also the only object on Wang Ling's side that wasn't part of Tao. The king's eye had many abilities. Powerful suppressive force, removing the false from the real, transcending illusions, freezing space, and so on if necessary. He could also destroy everything within his line of sight. The closer he was to his opponent, the more he could unleash the power of the king's eye. One of the limitations of the king's eye was its range. But it was mainly because he could suppress the power of the king's eye, especially when the talisman seal was still active. At the moment, the king's eye's power was less than 5%. Naturally, the range was only 5%. It's over. Wang Ling stared at Wang Ying. Using the power of the king's eye to remove the false from the real, he condensed the huge black shadow in front of him into Wang Ying's appearance. To be honest, Wang Ying had indeed been a little anxious when he attacked. If he had used the universe refining array to fight him, Wang Ling felt that the other party would have had a chance to touch him. But unfortunately, there were no ifs. However, was Wang Ying really panicking? Wang Ling felt that there might be another reason for this. Whose idea was this? Wang Ling asked Wang Ying at that moment. Although Wang Ying was indeed anxious to get rid of him, as his own shadow, Wang Ling believed that Wang Ying's thoughts wouldn't be so evil. Thus, it definitely wasn't Wang Ying who could think of sacrificing the lives of the entire solar system to draw enough power for himself. On the other hand, although Wang Ying seemed anxious to attack, he had probably already anticipated this situation. It wasn't anyone's idea. Wang Ying turned his head, his white hair drenched in sweat. Beads of sweat peeled off his body and flew into the starry sky, before finally quickly condensing into ice particles that dissipated along with the dust. Wang Ling pursed his lips. Although he couldn't read Wang Ying's mind, he had enough patience. When you merge with me again, I'll still know. Wang Ling looked at the white hair in front of him and said in a low voice, "But I want to hear you say it yourself." You. This time, it was Wang Ying who fell silent. As a shadow, Wang Ying felt that he had always been neglected. He was trying his best to get rid of Wang Ling, but in the end, it was to prove his existence. He thought for a long time. In the end, Wang Ying still gave his hint. Behind the void gate, some things could be said and some things couldn't. Wang Ling knew that this was probably all that Wang Ying knew. At that moment, Wang Ying laughed bitterly. "Erase me, it's really tiring to be your shadow. Is that what you really mean?" Wang Ling asked. He saw the youngster's evasive expression. After a few seconds, Wang Ling stretched out his arm and grasped the youngster's hand. In that instant, Wang Ying's entire body scattered, and like a plate of quicksand or a stream, he slowly merged with Wang Ling again. What astonished Wang Ying was that not only hadn't Wang Ling completely erased him, he had even retained all his intelligence and memories. The moment before he returned to Wang Ling's body, Wang Ying's eyes widened in disbelief. Aren't you afraid that I'll run away again?" Wang Ling shook his head lightly. "Even if you run away, I'll catch you and bring you back." The moment Wang Ying returned to Wang Ling's body, Wang Ling gave him his answer in his heart. After getting rid of Wang Ying, Wang Ling's last step was to remove the phenomena pillar stuck in the sun spirit's body. The moment Wang Ling used his spirit power to move the omniscient phenomenon pillar away, the sun spirit felt his breathing instantly become smoother. He looked at Wang Ling in awe, but more than that he trembled. Is this a fight between immortals? Wang Ling recalled the last hint Wang Ying had given him. The source of all this had a lot to do with the void gate that Master Li Shaokai had wanted to break through back then. Do you know what's behind the void gate? Wang Ling asked the sun spirit at that moment. The sun spirit had been alive for billions of years, and Wang Ling felt that the sun spirit might be able to tell him the answer he wanted. The sun spirit was lost in thought at this question. After a long while, the sun spirit's hollow voice rang out. Behind the void gate is emptiness. Chapter 1199. Wang Ling pulled out the omniscient elephant pillar stuck in the sun spirit's body, and the pitch-black pillar instantly shrank to the size of a toothpick in his hand. Using the power of the king's eye to search repeatedly, Wang Ling realized that he couldn't find the corresponding material to cast this omniscient elephant pillar in any of the 10 universes. Wang Ling was secretly astonished. Like his king's eye, this pillar wasn't part of Tao. Pinching the shrunken pillar between 2 fingers, he carefully pondered what the sun spirit had just said. Behind the void gate is emptiness. Then what on earth was this emptiness? There was no lack of people in this world who felt empty. Sometimes, even Wang Ling himself would feel completely empty. Could it be that the person who lived behind the void gate was also an expert who stood in an invincible place like him, and often felt lonely and empty? But this was just Wang Ling's speculation. If he wanted an answer, he would have to open the void gate and find out. You're very strong. At that moment, the hollow voice of the sun spirit, which was like that of a benevolent old man, rang out in the air once again. As a cosmic spirit that had lived for billions of years, the sun spirit had its own ideas and insights. I've lived for billions of years. Compared to me, all the cultivators on Earth are but a drop in the ocean. No human can live for billions of years. But in the entire universe, I'm just like an ant. Anyone who enters the void gate will die. Perhaps this isn't a place you can set foot in. What surprised Wang Ling was that the sun spirit, who never nagged, was actually saying so much to warn him. What magic treasure is this? Wang Ling asked as he pinched the thin black needle in his hand. He had been studying it for a long time, but still couldn't figure out what it was. This is a void object derived from the void gate. If even you can't figure it out, then that's enough to prove that what's behind the void gate isn't something you can touch. The sun spirit's tone was very indifferent when it said this, but in its heart, it was secretly glad that Wang Ling had actually suffered a setback. The truth was that as the sun spirit, it didn't know what on earth was behind the void gate, nor did it know whether Wang Ling would die if he stepped into the void gate. However, in the long river of history, the sun spirit had witnessed too many creatures who had tried to cross the void gate and died. This was not a legend, but an existence on par with the gate between worlds and the gate of the heavenly Tao. So far, the void gate was the only one he hadn't seen yet. Behind the gate between worlds was the demon realm. This was an artificial door designed by immortal Zhen Yuan. Because it wasn't stable, it often appeared on Earth without permission and brought disaster. The gate of Heavenly Tao led directly to the Heavenly Tao Governing Committee, where the 6 great Heavenly Tao were located. As a whitelist user, every time Wang Ling went there, it was like returning home. Judging from this, Wang Ling felt that the void gate might also be connected to another world. It was just that this void gate looked especially low-key. If there really was some kind of advanced creature inside, then Wang Ling felt that it was indeed low-key enough. Perhaps it was because he was too strong, so he felt disdain? But these were just his speculations. Although he was curious about the void gate, it hadn't disturbed his normal life thus far, nor had it disturbed him from eating his crispy noodle snacks. Thus, Wang Ling couldn't take the initiative to open the void gate. It wasn't that he couldn't open it, but that he didn't think it would be too violent to tear down someone else's door without a proper reason. As for this omniscient elephant pillar which the sun spirit had defined as an object of the void, Wang Ling felt that it would be better to return it at the right time. After all, it belonged to someone else. It was Friday, November 21st, the 7th day of the National Cultivation School Body Technique Competition, and there was still one day left until the end. Wang Ling and Crispy Noodle Snacks exchanged their identities in the temporary toilet set up by number 60 High's camp. After confirming the time, Wang Ling realized that when he and Wang Ying had fought in space, 3 days had already passed on Earth. This was probably the after-effect of the King's Eye's ability to stop time. Stopping time in an area would result in a time difference with the outside world. It was just that Wang Ling hadn't thought too much about it at the time. He was just glad that he hadn't stopped time for too long. Otherwise he might have directly graduated from high school, and this book would have come to an end at that time. After a full 7 days, it was already the final moment to decide the winner. When Wang Ling came out of the toilet, he found that everyone else from the other schools had already left. Crispy Noodle Snacks had compiled a memory chain of everything that had happened during this period of time, and transmitted it to Wang Ling. Little Silver, Loopy Toad and Wang Zhen's mission had gone very smoothly. All the flowers of the living dead in the stalactite cave which had been pregnant with the embryo had been completely destroyed. They had rescued Old Huang, and the fake Old Huang had been taken down by President Qi and Ajua in one fell swoop. Of all the experts who had been resurrected, only Li Xiaokai's master Li Huanran and Jiang Yingyue had survived. Li Huanran's existence was beneficial to the study of the Void Gate. At the same time, Jiang Yingyue would be an excellent witness to the chaos this time. President Qi needed her as a witness to report to the head of state. Of course, the main reason why Jiang Yingyue had survived was because of Mother Wang. That evil remnant, who had pretended to be Mother Wang and used Numinous Mother to swindle people everywhere, was everyone's next target. After Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal actively communicated with Huaxiu Alliance, they decided to issue a worldwide arrest warrant after verifying the relevant details. On the other side, on the 6th day of the competition, the camps formed by the schools broke up after they divided up the resources they had obtained during the alliance period. The schools who were still alive agreed to avoid fighting in the following day, and made a gentleman's oath. If someone from a school broke the rules and launched a sneak attack on another school in advance, they would be despised by all the other schools. Although it was said that all was fair in a competition, if someone broke the oath to win the championship, they would be despised by everyone even if they did. Now the 7th day had arrived, and it was also the deadline for the gentleman's oath. Wang Ling looked at the numbers displayed on the domed mountain. Now all the schools added up had less than 80 people left. Wang Ling took stock of the remaining people from number 60 high school. Good heavens, not a single person from number 60 high school had left. Of the less than 80 people left, their number 60 high school accounted for close to 10% of them. In contrast, the other schools seemed to be in a more tragic state. Take the previous favorites for the championship as an example. Number of people remaining from South Sea Sky High School 4. Number of people remaining from Titan High School 3. Number of people remaining from Balance Flame High School 1. In contrast, number 60 high school was as steady as an old dog. Chapter 1200. Number 60 high's overwhelming advantage in numbers might seem like a good thing, but in Wang Ling's view, it was actually pushing number 60 high into the teeth of the storm. Checks and balances were important in a large-scale competition. When the other schools saw that number 60 high was still at full strength, they might form an alliance again in the last 2 days to get rid of number 60 high first. In fact, Wang Ling's worries soon became reality. Apart from us, there are 11 surviving schools out of the remaining 60-odd people. They've already received reliable information, and have decided to send one person each to form a vanguard coalition army to encircle and annihilate us first. At noon, Lotus Sun explained the current situation to everyone through Mysterious Ocean's holographic water map. After the schools learned that number 60 high was still at full strength, led by the perception-type expert Nan Ishio, they immediately formed a coalition army of 11 people in an attempt to launch an attack on number 60 high. It didn't necessarily have to be a one-for-one exchange. Even if number 60 high lost some members, that would still be good. This is the critical stage. The final score of the competition will be calculated based on accumulated points, survival points, and bonus points. In the early and middle stages of the competition, everyone will cooperate with each other to survive, so there shouldn't be a lot of points for each school. But if we can rely on our numerical advantage to hold on, our number 60 high will gain a huge advantage in terms of survival points, and even win directly. Lotus Sun said confidently. Survival points were the most important factor. When the final tally of the survival battle came on the 8th day, points would be calculated based on the final number of people in each school's delegation. One person who survived would get an extra 100 points. If number 60 high didn't lose any members by the last day, they would be able to pull away from the other schools by a large margin. Compared with accumulating points in battle, this was the fastest way. While Lotus Sun was discussing the battle plan, Wang Zhen, Gu Xuanji and the others were bored to death as they stared at the sky. There was almost no suspense in this competition for number 60 high. It was almost the last day, but number 60 high actually hadn't lost a single person. This actually felt a little unreal. They had come to learn how to act from Wang Ling, but their acting wasn't even real at all. Thus, the following conversation took place in an independent mental space. Jinyuan hissed. Isn't our acting too fake? It's almost over, but no one has fallen? Gu Xuanji nodded and couldn't agree more with Jinyuan's point of view. Venerated Immortal is right. I also think it's a little fake. Why don't someone demonstrate how to make your death more natural? Lu Qingyi quickly came up with a plan. This Wang Zhen is really good. Wang Zhen. Thus, just as Lotus Sun's side came up with a plan to deal with the enemy, Wang Zhen started to drag Lu Qingyi and the others along to jump off the cliff. This was the plan that Gu Xuanji and the others had discussed together. If number 60 high really won the championship by a large margin, it might be a little like attracting hatred. Thus, Gu Xuanji calculated that if the four of them withdrew from the competition now, not only would they help the other schools save some face, they would also narrow the gap and help number 60 high win the competition by a small margin. Of course, if they were to jump too directly, it would seem like they were going easy on him, so it was crucial to act realistically. The leap of faith was a very romantic thing, especially when a man and a woman were together. It gave off a special feeling. Thus, on the evening of the 7th day, the vanguard force of the number 60 High Must Die Alliance, which consisted of the remaining 11 schools led by South Sea Sky High and Titan High, received new news. The message was simple. On number 60 High's side, 4 people had been killed. Nan Ishio's first reaction when he heard the news was naturally a black face full of question marks. Their premeditated attack hadn't even started yet, so how could 4 people be dead? I heard that in the beginning, someone fell off the cliff while gathering spirit fruit, and the people behind him went to catch him, but in the end, they were all taken down. Are they all right? They triggered the golden light shield. What could possibly happen to them? For some reason, Nan Ishio didn't seem very happy when he heard this news. Instead, he sensed a conspiracy. He was the leader of this vanguard force, and had originally planned to launch a sneak attack on number 60 High's camp that night, mainly because number 60 High was currently at full strength, which was very disadvantageous to the other schools. But now that 4 people had died all at once, there was actually no need to organize this operation in theory. Apart from Nan Ishio himself, the other 11 people in number 60 High's vanguard team had been carefully selected to represent the middle combat strength of each school, which was also very crucial right now. Number 60 High's numbers were basically the same as those of the senior schools, so there was indeed no need to take any more risks. But Nan Ishio still felt that there was something fishy about this. He had spent 6 days with the people from number 60 High. Number 60 High's overall combat strength wasn't outstanding, and the school's overall combat strength was in the middle of the pack. Student Lotus Sun was indeed very good, but in a team game, one person's excellence was useless. At that moment, a drop of rain landed on the tip of Nan Ishio's nose, and then exploded. Nan Ishio raised his head, and suddenly realized that it was actually drizzling. This kind of weather was actually extremely disadvantageous for a sneak attack. Although they were already here, there really didn't seem to be any need for a sneak attack. They hadn't even made a move, but 4 people from number 60 high had already died. But in the next moment, Nanishio's expression changed dramatically. Not good. What's wrong? We've fallen into a trap. Nanishio's eyes lit up at that moment as he realized that there was a great danger here. Unfortunately, it was already too late. In the dense mountain forest in the distance, several beams of golden light shield had already shot up into the sky. It's over, it's all over. Nanishio looked at the increasing number of golden beams of light, unable to hide the despair on his face. No matter how much he had calculated, he had overlooked the important factor of the weather. Lotus Sun, who had already awakened a sword spirit, especially in a rainy operation, and her mysterious sea sword would almost give her an absolute advantage. It was like fighting on her home ground. She could borrow the power of the rain to identify each person's position, and then remotely control sword chi to take them down one by one. It might be difficult for Lotus Sun to do this on her own, but number 60 High's camp still had 6 people. In addition, Lotus Sun had used the various materials they had collected in the coalition army a few days ago, and combined them with her own pill-making machine to quickly refine elixirs that could replenish spirit chi. In this heavy rain, Lotus Sun could practically do whatever she wanted. It could only be said that, as expected of the young miss of Huagua Water Curtain Group and the captain of number 60 High, she could actually scheme to this extent. Chapter 1201. No one had expected Lotus Sun to take advantage of the heavy rain to use the power of Mysterious Sea's sword spirit to wield sword chi from a distance to destroy the enemy, although in the end, not everyone was eliminated. On the 8th day, there were 12 people left on the field. Number 60 High had 6. The other 6 were Nanishio from South Sea Sky High, for Eyes, who had been with Wang Zhen earlier, Zhu Hanyan from Titan High, junior sister Yen Xiaochun from the same school, Tang Jingzi from number 59 High, and Yi Jiang, the team leader from Sword God Academy. Number 60 High's team knew more or less about the others, but they were curious about Yi Jiang's background. What kind of school is Sword God Academy? Superchen rubbed his head, feeling confused. I think an uncle mentioned it to me before. It's a newly established cultivation high school in Jinghua City. I didn't expect such a young school to have someone in the national competition for the first time, but I don't know who this Yi Jiang is. There were too many students participating in the competition, and even uncles like Dopigua couldn't remember every single one of them clearly. The point was that Sword God Academy wasn't on Headmaster Chen's list of precautions to begin with. Now that someone had suddenly broken out of the encirclement, the contestants from all the schools were taken aback. If the competition hadn't started yet, Hirogua might have been able to find out Yi Jiang's identity through other means. But now that they were in a competition, even if he had a way out of the ring, he couldn't use it openly. In the command center, old Huang sipped hot tea. He was wrapped in a thick cotton quilt, which was a special magic treasure that could dispel the cold and strengthen one's body. This was the real old Huang. Previously, he had been trapped in the cold pool in the stalactite cave, and his entire body had been frozen. Teacher, are you feeling better? President Qi asked concernedly. I'm already a lot better. Old Huang gazed at Yi Jiang on the screen. By the way, could this person be? Teacher, you're absolutely right. President Qi nodded with a smile. Sword God Academy students naturally specialized in swordsmanship, and the team leader was surnamed Yi. How many people in the world of swordsmanship could compete with this Yi Jiang? Elder Huang studied Yi Jiang's appearance carefully. Then he frowned and shook his head slightly. He transmitted his voice. He doesn't look like him. Also, I remember that Yi Jianchuan is a 1,000-year-old virgin who doesn't have a wife. When did he have such a big son? He's not his own. President Qi smiled and replied telepathically. This old Wang from next door? Elder Huang was astonished. Teacher, you think too much. This is a child that old Yi picked up more than 10 years ago. It is said that he was born with a sword bone. He saw that he was a promising talent, so he adopted him as his son. So that was how it was. Old Huang was relieved. Now, all the doubts in his heart were resolved. In the middle of the 7th night, Lotus Sun's sword rain baptism had directly eliminated most of the people. Among the many split screens in front of him, old Huang immediately recognized Yi Jiang in the corner. At that time, Yi Jiang had been sitting alone on the cliff, his pure white school uniform swaying in the wind. He hadn't brandished any magic artifacts, and had only plucked a handful of grass from the ground to fuse his sword intent into it. He had used the power of the grass to form a powerful sword screen, which had withstood Mysterious Sea's sword rain baptism. No one would have thought that on the last day of the competition, there would actually be a batch of dark horses like this. It was Saturday, November 22nd, the 8th day of the National Cultivation School Body Technique Competition. After a discussion among the surviving students, everyone unanimously decided that the final battle would be a one-on-one duel on the round top mountain. The opponents would be decided by drawing lots. How about we write the names of all the people from number 60 high on a piece of paper, and the 6 of you each draw one? Nan Ishio suggested. The 6 of you want to challenge the 6 of us from number 60 high? Then why don't we write your names together? Superchin felt that this was unfair. A one-on-one duel was already the biggest concession number 60 high could make. Otherwise, given the current situation, number 60 high could completely attack as a group and defeat them one by one. There was no need for them to fight on the round top mountain at all. The reason why Lotus Sun had agreed to the one-on-one duel was actually because she had followed Headmaster Chen's instructions. There was no other reason, and the main reason was to leave the other schools some face and hope. If they really fought them as a group, the chances of the other schools winning were minuscule. Furthermore, a one-on-one duel would make the competition more enjoyable to watch, and Lotus Sun especially liked this feeling. But in the end, this wasn't something Superchin could decide, and he had to listen to Lotus Sun's instructions when leading the team. One-on-one is fine. The victory of this competition is destined to belong to number 60 high. If this can convince you, that's fine too. This decision wasn't because Lotus Sun was too arrogant and conceited, but because she truly had confidence in everyone from number 60 high. After the baptism of her Mysterious Sea sword rain last night, almost everyone from the other schools had been exhausted. Furthermore, they already didn't have any extra supplies to replenish their spirit chi and physical strength. On no. 60 high's side, on the other hand, because Lotus Sun was constantly producing pills, everyone's spirit chi, physical strength and mental state were all relatively excellent. Thus, even if it was a one-on-one duel, Lotus Sun felt that number 60 high would still have the upper hand. Then it's a deal. Hearing that Lotus Sun had agreed to the duel, Nan Ishio was beyond excited. He took out the bamboo sticks that he had prepared beforehand, and placed them in the bamboo tube for the 6 people on his side to draw. The names of each person from number 60 high were written on the bamboo sticks. Student Tang and Student E, you have the fewest number of people, so you get priority. All right. Tang Jingza stepped forward and drew a stick, but the person who drew it was Superchin, which disappointed him a little since he actually wanted to fight Wang Ling more. Yi Jiang, on the other hand, held his temper and crossed his arms with a rather cold expression on his face. I don't need it. You can just give the rest to me. All right. Nan Ishio's lips curled up. After everyone had drawn lots, the dueling list had also been finalized. The first round of the promotion round. Tang Jingza against Hirogua, Yi Jiang against Lotus Sun, Zhu Hanyan against Superchin, Yen Xiaoqun against Li Yue, For Eyes in South Sea Sky against Xiaoming. And the last person Nan Ishio drew was Wang Ling. In fact, it was Nan Ishio who had arranged all the draws. Nan Ishio drawing Wang Ling had also been part of his plan, and he had drawn classmate Wang Ling, who was known as number 60 high's mascot, a top-class horse against a low-class horse. According to the rules of Tianji's horse race, Nan Ishio felt that he was very confident of advancing to the first round. Thinking this, Nan Ishio curled his lips and was secretly delighted. Classmate Wang Ling, I'm sorry. Wang Ling. Chapter 1202. After the lots were drawn, the one-on-one match officially began. There weren't any fancy rules, because everyone had a protective golden talisman. As long as the protective golden talisman's life-saving effect was triggered, the match would be considered a victory. At that moment, there were only 12 people left on the domed mountain, but including the members of the special forces patrolling nearby, the commanders in the command center, the headmasters of each school, and the netizens who had been watching the live stream for several days. There were hundreds of millions of people watching this national body technique competition. The main reason this competition had attracted so much attention and discussion was that it was jointly organized by Huaxiu Alliance and the most popular sect in the world, the Office of Strategic Deception. The students who could survive until the last day were the cream of the crop among the current foundation establishment cultivators in the cultivation world, which was an important reference for parents in the cultivation world when choosing schools in the future. The first match was between Zhu Hanyan of Titan High School and Super Chin. In this situation, the contest between these two muscular men seemed to be particularly interesting. But Hirogul wasn't optimistic about the outcome. Zhu Hanyan is the captain of Titan High School. Although he's exhausted physically, can Super Chin win? First of all, the Titan art that Zhu Hanyan cultivated was already very troublesome. His muscles were denser than an ordinary person's, and even if Super Chin used a spirit sword to slash out sword chi, he might not be able to pierce through it. Most importantly, this was a one-on-one duel on the surface. Using a spirit sword in a chaotic fight for survival was fine, but as a fair one-on-one duel, everyone couldn't help but think back to the original theme of this national competition, body technique. If they still used a spirit sword in this situation, there was an 80 to 90% chance that they would be accused of having an unfair advantage. Zhu Hanyan's side, who couldn't use a spirit sword and had to rely purely on body technique, had a natural advantage over Super Chin, who cultivated the Titan art and was famous for his body technique. But even so, Super Chin still had to fight. He wasn't a coward. As a descendant of Strength Super Martial Arts Dojo, he knew that his father would definitely be paying attention to this match. Looking at the abnormally powerful Zhu Hanyan in front of him, Super Chin felt a little bitter in his heart, but his attention was also raised to the extreme. Of course he knew how strong Zhu Hanyan was. In the first round, the other party had used his strength, which surpassed that of an ordinary foundation establishment cultivator, to turn himself into a cannon and launch his school students one by one from the ground to the top of the tower. A total of 700,000 steps were taken in a single leap. This had given Super Chin a huge shock at the time. While Super Chin was thinking, Dopigua's voice suddenly rang out. Super Chin, don't you like these kinds of muscular men the most? Fight him head on. Who's afraid of who? Even if I can't win, I'll still kill him with milk. Super Chin looked helpless. Wang Ling was also deeply aware that it wasn't good to be a milk of utility. Super Chin's blessed mouth would only work if it wasn't affected by any distracting thoughts. On the other side, Zhu Hanyan, who was also a muscular bro, seemed particularly enthusiastic about the word milk, and his expression gradually turned excited. Classmate Super Chin, you want to milk me? What a pity. Your chest isn't as big as mine. As soon as he said that, Zhu Hanyan threw a punch at Super Chin like a cannonball. Both of them were at the peak late foundation establishment stage. There was no difference in realms, but the advantage in cultivation techniques couldn't be ignored. Whether it was in terms of strength or speed, Zhu Hanyan's punch was actually above the peak late foundation establishment stage, and was almost infinitely close to the strength of an early golden core cultivator. Any student at the same realm might not be able to withstand the power of this punch. What was more, this wasn't an ordinary punch. Wang Ling could see wind and thunder twisting around Zhu Hanyan's fist as it came crashing down. Based on his heavenly Dao spell, Zhu Hanyan's punch was probably a level 3 fist technique called Wind and Thunder Shock. It was already very astonishing for a foundation establishment student to learn a level 3 spirit technique. Although Zhu Hanyan looked like he had just learned it, it could still greatly enhance the power of an ordinary fist. In the blink of an eye, the punch had already reached Super Chin. To everyone's surprise, Super Chin didn't dodge at all. His eyes were fixed on the path of Zhu Hanyan's fist, and just as it was about to reach him, he suddenly shifted his position and used a skillful force to attack Zhu Hanyan's flank at the same time. Is this pushing hand? In the command center, all the headmasters watched this scene. Super Chen's pushing hand was simple and unadorned, but it made Zhu Hanyan's powerful blow feel like it had smashed heavily into a ball of cotton. Interesting, he actually thought of using the strength of 1,000 caddies to deal with it. Old Huang nodded in approval. He had seen it clearly from here. Zhu Hanyun's punch was extremely fast, and an average foundation establishment cultivator wouldn't be able to catch it at all. Pushing hand wasn't a complicated skill, but if you wanted to use it in actual combat, it would be very difficult for you to deal with an enemy unless you had painstakingly cultivated it for many years. It was like those people who thought they had actual combat ability after learning a set of army boxing. Learning and putting it into practice were two different things. Super Chen's ability to react so quickly in such a short period of time was something that could only be achieved after years of practice. But praise aside, Old Huang still didn't know who would win this fight. He could see that Super Chen had a lot of combat experience. Perhaps it was because he had grown up in his family's martial arts dojo, and had seen a lot, learned a lot, and practiced a lot. Naturally, he had more combat experience than an ordinary person. But his opponent was the captain of Titan High School. If he thought that he could defeat the enemy with just one pushing hand, he would be underestimating Zhu Hanyun too much. Although he had lost the first move, Zhu Hanyun wasn't discouraged, and instead became braver as the fight went on. Once he was sure that Super Chen would play the 4 caddies to deal with 1,000 caddies routine, Zhu Hanyun quickly changed his boxing style. If the wind and thunder shock at the beginning was about explosive power, then the chaotic rain Zhu Hanyun was now using, which relied on attack speed. Pushing hands, which could push 1,000 caddies with little effort, might have a surprising effect in the face of an explosive fist technique, but now that Zhu Hanyun had turned into a speed-type attack, even if Super Chen knew how to push hands, it would be of no use in the face of such a barrage of attacks. There was a rustling sound in the field, and each of Zhu Hanyun's punches landed solidly on Super Chen's body. Is he going to lose? Everyone from number 60 high school was extremely nervous. After the first round of attacks, Super Chen's face was covered in bruises, and he had even lost one of his teeth. It looked like he had already suffered an extremely serious injury. But to everyone's surprise, Super Chen's protective golden talisman hadn't been triggered. Under such astonishing attacks, his life-saving effect actually hadn't been triggered? Everyone was stupefied. As long as the protective golden talisman hadn't been triggered, it meant that Super Chen could still fight. This man's tenacity exceeded even Zhu Hanyun's expectations. Chapter 1203. After 2 rounds, it looked like Super Chen was just taking a beating. His face was already swollen like a pig's head. His body was covered in bruises, and even the upper half of his school uniform had been smashed by Zhu Hanyun's punches. Chaotic Rain was a high-density and high-attack technique, and its lethality was staggering. However, Zhu Hanyun wasn't completely unscathed under the relentless onslaught. After 2 rounds of one-sided attacks, his aura was already a little unstable. Zhu Hanyun wouldn't be able to use Chaotic Rain a second time in a short period of time, since it was a fist technique that tested endurance and energy consumption. Most importantly, Zhu Hanyun actually still had some misgivings, and hadn't completely let loose. Considering that he could advance to the next round, Zhu Hanyun wanted to preserve some of his physical strength and spirit energy for the next round of battle. He had thought that his Chaotic Rain move would be enough to trigger Super Chen's protective golden talisman, but unfortunately, the situation didn't go his way. Although it looked like Super Chen had already reached his limit, and he might be able to trigger the protective golden talisman with just one ordinary punch, a competition was a competition, and there was no room for luck. Zhu Hanyun felt that he had miscalculated against Super Chen. If he hadn't taken the competition into account when he had used Chaotic Rain in the second round, and had instead focused on dealing with the current situation, Super Chen might have already been eliminated. But unfortunately, there were no ifs in this world. I've been studying martial arts under my father's guidance since I was a child, and I've grown up with various senior brothers and sisters. I'm afraid it won't be that easy for you to knock me down. Super Chen wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Although his teeth had been broken, this injury might really be nothing to him. In order to write his essay, Wang Ling had specially flipped through Super Chen's childhood memories, and the toughness in Super Chen's bones had really been passed down from his ancestors. Fighting above one's level was commonplace. If the people you practice with since you were a child were always 2 or 3 levels higher than you on average, you might also be able to take a beating like this. So this kind of man wouldn't just knock down like that. From this point of view, Super Chen and Wang Zhen were actually a little similar. The difference was that Super Chen had been forced to take a beating when he practiced with others, while Wang Zhen had been actively trained since he was a child, and even had to beat himself up. So when Wang Zhen, who was watching from the sidelines at that moment, saw Super Chen's indomitable spirit, he couldn't help sighing with emotion in his heart. This was a promising talent. While Super Chen was talking, Zhu Hanyan quickly adjusted his breathing. As the team leader of Titan High School, even if he couldn't help the school win the competition in the end, he absolutely couldn't lose to an ordinary number 60 high representative. Classmate Super Chen, why are you doing this? A helpless expression appeared on Zhu Hanyan's face. You should make better use of your golden protective light. Relying on your own tenacity to persevere in the competition will only bring you harm. Although my chaotic rain flow just now was lenient and didn't directly attack your vital acupuncture points, but at the same time, I sealed off many of your acupuncture points. You should already be unable to use your spiritual power now. Under the state of having your spirit sealed by me, you basically have no chance of winning. Why don't you surrender earlier? As soon as he finished speaking, the scene boiled up again. Super Chen's spirit has been sealed. Hirogua frowned deeply. Sealing a spirit was like hitting an acupoint. Although it was only temporary, it was absolutely taboo for a cultivator to have their spirit sealed in the middle of a fight. Hearing Zhu Hanyan's words, Super Chen clenched his teeth. Even if it's a spirit sealed, it won't be so easy for you to defeat me. Maybe you even helped me open up some Rendu Ermai, making me stronger. Hearing this, Zhu Hanyan immediately sneered. What a joke! Do you think this kind of thing can happen to you? In the process of receiving a one-sided beating, there was indeed the possibility of an acupoint being opened up, but the probability was so low that it was almost the same as winning the lottery. But in the third round, Super Chen was the first to attack. Even though he was injured all over, not only did Super Chen's speed and strength not weaken in the slightest, they actually looked even stronger than before. Even though his spirit had been sealed, he was still able to display such a powerful explosive power. Zhu Hanyan looked at Super Chen's burning gaze incredulously, his face full of disbelief. Impossible. Everything is reasonable. Nothing is impossible. Super Chen punched Zhu Hanyan's face fiercely. To everyone's surprise, the Titan art that Zhu Hanyan cultivated didn't seem to have any effect at that moment. With Super Chen's punch, Zhu Hanyan was directly sent flying like a kite with a broken string. He landed heavily on the ground, leaving only a shallow pit. What the hell is going on? On the side, Xiaoming was puzzled. Classmate Zhu Hanyan's Titan art has already reached a certain level, and he weighs several thousand jin. There's no way he could have been sent flying so easily. Everyone turned to look at Zhu Hanyan's little junior sister, Yin Xiaochun. Seeing her puckered little mouth and anxious expression, a lot of people realized that Super Chen might have accidentally broken some vital part of the Titan art. While a lot of people were guessing what on earth had happened, Wang Ling had already seen through the answer to the questionnaire. For a body technique cultivator, sealing a spirit actually didn't mean much, since martial body techniques relied more on one's qi, or qigong. The reason why Zhu Hanyan paid so much attention to maintaining his spirit energy was largely because of the Titan art he cultivated. When he was full of spirit energy, Zhu Hanyan, who cultivated the Titan art, was like a balloon filled with air, his body brimming with tension. The density of his body would also increase with the technique, and he would look as indestructible and as heavy as Mount Tai. However, once his spirit energy was consumed, Zhu Hanyan's weight would also drop. This was like a balloon leaking air. The consequence of his weight loss was naturally that his body wouldn't be as dense as before. That was why Zhu Hanyan's body had been so easily shaken by Super Chen's punch. Under normal circumstances, an ordinary punch naturally wouldn't have been able to do this. Where does your strength come from? Zhu Hanyan crawled up from the ground, still trying hard to recover his spirit energy. At the same time, he was astonished by the strength of Super Chen's punch. Didn't I tell you? Your chaotic rain flow seems to have stimulated my body. I feel like all the cells in my body are boiling now, and there's a steady stream of energy pouring out. Super Chen looked even more excited. Zhu Hanyan's body swayed at these words. F***K. Had he run into a legendary expert at running his mouth? Chapter 1204. The outcome of the duel was still a mystery, and Lotus Sun analyzed the situation. For every martial artist who cultivated diligently for many years, the cells in their bodies would evolve as their tendons and meridians were unblocked and their acupoints were activated. These evolved cells were called power cells. There were 80 trillion cells in an adult's body, and grandmasters who had been practicing the latest martial arts for many years would have a higher proportion of power cells in their bodies after continuous development. For example, at Master Li Xiaokai's level, power cells would take up at least half of his body. There were at least 40 trillion of them. These power cells could play the role of all the other cells, and had powerful regulatory and cleaning abilities that could kill all the bad cells in the body. Hirogwa rubbed his double chin. So, classmate Lotus Sun, what you mean is that Zhu Hanyan's chaotic rain flow activated Super Chen's acupoints just now, thereby stimulating his body to produce even more power cells. That's right. Lotus Sun nodded. But these power cells were only temporary. As long as they were cells, they would constantly die and be replaced by the body's metabolism, and even powerful power cells were no exception. Thus, in order to ensure that the number of power cells in their bodies wouldn't weaken, martial artists would repeatedly train a lot every day. That kind of suffering wasn't something an ordinary person could endure. Super Chen had been cultivating since he was a child, and had a certain amount of power cells in his body. In contrast, Zhu Hanyan, who had the Titan art, was the complete opposite of Super Chen. To put it bluntly, the Titan art itself relied heavily on spirit energy, which stimulated the meridians and acupoints in the body to achieve an effect similar to activating power cells. The downside was that once spirit energy disappeared, a person would be as fragile as a piece of paper. On the other side, Super Chen seized the opportunity. He had just activated his power cells, and facing Zhu Hanyan, whose spirit energy hadn't yet fully recovered, he stepped forward and gave him a good beating. Zhu Hanyan had been accumulating power for too long, and since the Titan art hadn't been activated yet, his defense was greatly weakened. In the end, he was finally unable to bear the burden, and the golden protective talisman on him lit up. The outcome of this duel was unexpected, but reasonable. There were two main reasons for Zhu Hanyan's failure. First, he had already used up a lot of his stamina and spirit energy before the 8th day, and second, he had been hesitant during the fight. Before the Titan art disappeared, he had poured all his strength into killing Super Chen, and wanted to hold back for the next round of the competition. In the end, it had the opposite effect. Not only had he not entered the next round, but Super Chen had seized the opportunity to be eliminated in one fell swoop. This battle is really exciting. Indeed, there's nothing to say about our Titan High's inferior skills. Number 60 High's younger generation is to be reckoned with. Super Chen will definitely have some achievements in physical skills in the future, and he might really become a grandmaster like Li Xiaokai. As the headmaster of Titan High School, Lu Tian naturally felt humiliated when he saw his team leader lose the battle. But although she was angry as a headmaster, Lu Tian couldn't directly show it. She could only comment on the match on the spot and praise Super Chen, which gave her the air of a great master. But as headmaster Lu Tian's classmate, number 60 High School's headmaster Chen knew all too well what kind of person this old guy was, and was probably already vomiting blood in his heart. The other headmasters around them weren't fools, and could naturally hear the hint of jealousy in headmaster Lu Tian's words. Comparing a foundation establishment student to the Grandmaster Li Xiaokai, wasn't this clearly showing that she wasn't in the right position? But while all the headmasters were well aware of this, they still smiled politely and echoed Lu Tian's sentiments one after another. After all, Titan High still had a chance. They still had a girl called Yan Xiaochun who hadn't been eliminated. During the intermission, the order of the draw was decided. The second round of the competition was between Yi Jiyang and Lotus Sunday. There was no doubt that this was a battle of the spotlight. While both sides were preparing, relevant tactical discussions were underway. Although the 6 students up against number 60 high were from different schools, number 60 high was currently their common enemy. If they could get rid of Lotus Sun, their morale would definitely be greatly boosted. It was very likely that they would win consecutive matches and wipe out number 60 high in one fell swoop. I'm afraid that Lotus Sun is the strongest person on the other side. As long as we can get rid of her, I think we'll be able to win the next few rounds. Nan Ishio concluded. A large part of the reason why number 60 high's team had been able to maintain a high level of spirit and stamina until now was because of Lotus Sunday. As long as Lotus Sun wasn't eliminated, she could use her mysterious sea sword chi to help her team members recover some spirit power and stamina. A water sword spirit had a so-called healer halo, which could be used to assist in healing. So as long as they could get rid of the healer, number 60 high's most powerful fulcrum would instantly collapse. Now, everyone on Nan Ishio's side was pinning their hopes on Yi Jiyang. Even before Yi Jiyang went on stage, Nan Ishio organized the other 4 people, including himself, to instill some spirit power into Yi Jiyang to ensure that he would have enough spirit power when he faced Lotus Sunday. After about 10 minutes of preparation, the second round of the spotlight match finally began. As the captain of Sword God Academy, Yi Jiyang could already be called a dark horse in the competition. Lotus Sun, who was on the other side of the confrontation, was the center of attention. Student Lotus Sun, you can do it. Super Chun had just been injured, but he was now shouting louder than anyone else. Because just now Lotus Sun had personally used her mysterious sea to heal some of his injuries. It was as if classmate Lotus Sun had personally caressed him, which instantly filled him with adrenaline. Don't worry, I'll definitely win this round. Lotus Sun's face beamed with a confident smile, and her school uniform skirt swayed slightly in the wind. On the other side, Yi Jiyang coldly crossed his arms. His pure white school uniform made him look especially dazzling in the sunlight, like the son of the sun. Both sides were sword experts, and a lot of people were curious as to what kind of collision would occur. In the next moment, as Yi Jiyang's aura surged, many people's expressions instantly changed. This is a sword spirit blessing? The corners of many people's eyes twitched as they looked incredulous. He was just at the foundation establishment stage, but he could actually become one with the sword? A lot of people couldn't believe their eyes. By becoming one with the sword, he could fuse with the spirit sword and slash out sword chi invisibly. Furthermore, this wasn't considered breaking the rules, because in theory, as long as a spirit sword magic treasure wasn't used, it would be a proper duel of body techniques. So you also know this move. Faced with Yi Jiyang's aggressive aura, Lotus Sun naturally wasn't at a disadvantage. As a talented and beautiful girl, she had already mastered becoming one with the sword a long time ago. But she hadn't used it before, mainly because she felt a little ashamed. Because when she became one with the mysterious sea spirit sword, she would transform into a magical girl. Chapter 1205. Becoming one with the sword often depended on the characteristics of the sword spirit. Not all sword spirits would transform after fusing with the sword master. As a sword spirit whose true form was that of a cute girl, when the two girls fused together, they naturally had to consider the issue of clothing. Thus, when Lotus Sun also became one with the sword, her school uniform immediately transformed into a luxurious azure dress. For a moment, many people's pupils contracted. Who would have thought that Lotus Sun would really become a magical girl? After a few breaths, the duel officially began. The azure dress seemed to impede Lotus Sun's movements, but in fact the girl's speed far exceeded everyone's imagination. Her azure dress was an outer garment formed from mysterious sea spirit power, and wasn't a real body. When necessary, it could actually turn into mist. As she leapt, her gorgeous dress left a brilliant ripple in the air as she threw a punch at Yi Jiyang. But this was no ordinary fist technique. She had wrapped Mysterious Sea's sword intent around her fist. Thus, this punch was no longer a fist, but a sword. The attack range was actually much wider than it looked. Yi Jiyang felt his internal organs tremble violently. After Lotus Sun and Mysterious Sea fused together, the aura of her attack was like a tsunami. The fact that a spirit sword could form a sword spirit proved that the bond between the sword master and the spirit sword had reached a certain level. A swordsman who had activated a sword spirit might not necessarily be an expert, but a swordsman who didn't even have a sword spirit could only be described as worrisome in terms of swordsmanship. The fact that Lotus Sun could activate a sword spirit at the foundation establishment stage was enough to prove her skill in swordsmanship. Thus, Yang knew from the beginning that she was an excellent opponent. But even so, he still hadn't expected her to be able to do this. In the face of Lotus Sun's punch, Yang didn't dodge. His expression was calm and composed, and his pure white school uniform reflected a brilliant light. The next moment, a resplendent phantom appeared behind him. This was the sword spirit of Yang's Liyang sword. It turned out to be a person of light whose face couldn't be seen clearly, and whose entire body shone with holy splendor. In a flash, everyone understood that this was a contest between water and fire. Yang summoned his own sword spirit, Yangli. This was not a simple manifestation of the sword spirit, but a manifestation of sword will resonance. This was a whole new realm after becoming one with the sword. A simple one with the sword could only add the power of the sword spirit to one's body and enjoy the protection of the sword chi. On the other hand, those who resonated with the sword intent could freely use the sword chi, freely fusing it with every part of their body. Even if they plucked a strand of hair, they could turn it into an incomparably sharp weapon that could cut through iron like mud. When Yang completed the sword will resonance, the people around him were in an uproar. Even the principals in the command center could not sit still and stood up. Genius. A true genius. A principal couldn't help but sigh. The God of Sword Academy actually produced such a person? You can already resonate with sword intent at such a young age? The headmaster's shock was not without reason. Sword intent resonance was a very high realm in swordsmanship cultivation. Even a nascent soul cultivator might not be able to achieve this step, let alone a mere foundation establishment student. To be able to learn sword will resonance at such a young age, there was no doubt that this Yang would become a master swordsman in the future. The headmasters didn't know about Old Huang and President Qi's private discussion earlier. After seeing Yang display the power of sword will resonance, everyone began to speculate about his true identity. It would be great if we could poach such a seedling. A principal sighed. You want to poach him? God of Sword Academy is a new school to begin with, and it doesn't have much of a reputation. If we can extend an olive branch, the other party might not reject it. In your dreams, do you know who the person behind God of Sword Academy is? Someone in the know laughed bitterly. At this point, all the headmasters instantly fell silent. They were all smart people, and there were some things that could be said without going too far. In fact, after thinking about it carefully, all the headmasters knew how deep the water behind this was. God of Sword Academy was a new school that had been established for less than 5 years. In terms of seniority, such a school wouldn't even qualify for the national competition this time. So why had God of Sword Academy passed? This proved that there was probably a very powerful almighty standing behind the headmaster of God of Sword Academy. God of Sword. Sage of Sword. Yang. The familiar surname stunned many of the headmasters present. They all thought of one person at the same time. Could it be? Have you finally realized it? You're really slow. On the other side, Yang's attack was finally launched after the sword intent resonance. His entire body erupted with astonishing sword chi, which was mixed with the unique scorching aura of the Liyang sword. It was scorching and threatening. It collided with Lotus Sun's sword intent, which had fused into her jab, and scalding steam instantly rose from the two. Lotus Sun was indeed very strong. The moment the sword intent intertwined, Yang exclaimed in his heart. At the very least, this wasn't an opponent that he could defeat with one strike. Given Yang's understanding of the sword, he was now confident that he could defeat anyone below the golden core stage with one strike. But even though he exclaimed in his heart that Lotus Sun was very strong, Yang still hated the outcome of this match to the bone. Thus, during the collision, Yang folded his arms and said something very conceited that touched everyone's eardrums. Yang. Yang. Am invincible below the golden core stage. Wang Ling. Invincible below the golden core stage. Many people felt uncomfortable when they heard this, but they couldn't refute it. To be able to master the power of sword intent resonance at such a young age, it wasn't an exaggeration at all to say that he was invincible below the golden core stage. Classmate son, you're very strong, but not enough to deal with me. Yi Jiang had his arms crossed all this time as he maintained his lofty posture. As the sword intent collided, Yi Jiang just swept his gaze over her, and she immediately felt immense pressure. It was as if Apollo, the god of the sun, was driving a golden divine car at 280 kilometers per hour. Yi Jiang had actually separated a massive sword intent from his eyes. Not good. Lotus Sun frowned slightly. She couldn't choose to meet this powerful sword intent head-on, so she promptly separated a portion of Mysterious C's sword intent to block it, while her main body chose to withdraw and evade the attack. In the next moment, a shocking scene unfolded. Mysterious C's sword intent actually couldn't withstand Yang Li's ferocious attack at all. And in the collision, it actually shattered on the spot. When everyone came back to their senses, they saw a broken blue spirit sword at Lotus Sun's feet. All that was left of the sword was the hilt. A broken sword is a great taboo for a swordsman. Classmate son, it's time for you to admit defeat. Yi Jiang's lips curled as he looked at Lotus Sunday. Lotus Sun carefully picked up the fragments on the ground one by one and held them in her hands, her eyes filled with deep heartache. You've worked hard. Are you talking to your sword spirit? If the sword is broken, the sword spirit won't be able to live for long, Yi Jiang said. Thank you for the reminder, classmate Yi. This Mysterious C is indeed broken, but who told you? I only have one Mysterious C. As soon as she said this, the sword intent in Lotus Sun's body surged again, and the aura of the Mysterious C, which had originally been destroyed, was revived once more. Your Mysterious C. That's right, my Mysterious C isn't dead. I've never shown this to anyone before. Lotus Sun smiled slightly. The so-called Mysterious C doesn't just represent a spirit sword. It's actually a girl group. One just broke, and I still have 47. And each one has a sword spirit. Everyone. Chapter 1206. As Lotus Sun took out the second Mysterious C in front of everyone, and once again performed the human sword unity technique, all the onlookers sucked in a breath of cold air. It seemed that this wasn't just a contest between water and fire, but also a contest between money. A headmaster in the command center was shocked by Lotus Sun's heroism. Is this a twin sword spirit? No, I'm guessing it's a twin sword spirit plus a clone sword spirit. Given Huagua Water Curtain Group's wealth, it shouldn't be difficult for them to entrust Spirit Sword Company to duplicate spirit swords and sword spirits. That is to say, of these 48 Mysterious Cs, Student Lotus Sun has 2 original spirit swords, and the other 46 are clones. Then it looks like this one is also a clone. That's right. Student Lotus Sun won't take out her original spirit swords lightly, unless she has no other choice. Many headmasters could tell at a glance that the first and second Mysterious Cs that Lotus Sun had just taken out were both clones. Although the clone sword spirit was created based on the original spirit, there was in fact still a certain difference in their overall attributes, which was why the clone sword had broken so easily. The suspense in the second round of the duel was still unresolved. Yi Jiang's claim that he was invincible below the golden core stage sounded arrogant and conceited, but he indeed had the capital to brag. But Lotus Sun's battle strength wasn't weak below the golden core stage. It could be said that this was a contest between Sword God Academy's Yi Jiang and number 60 High School's Lotus Sun, which represented the top level of the current younger generation of cultivators. Many people did not expect such an exciting battle to take place. The principals in the command center all secretly regretted not starting a bet earlier. The purpose of starting a bet was not for money. The principals were betting on their ability to read people. If anyone could correctly guess the outcome of the battle, they would be able to use it as a topic of conversation in the future. Who do you think will win? At that moment, old Huang, who was sitting at the very front, chuckled. He could sense that the headmasters behind him couldn't take it anymore. But there were clear rules about starting a bet, and it actually wasn't allowed in terms of procedures and regulations. Thus old Huang thought of an excuse. Anyone who guesses correctly will be rewarded. Old Huang's reward? At that moment, a number of headmasters had interested expressions on their faces. Everyone was well aware of old Huang's identity, so naturally, the reward he would give would not be an ordinary item. Some headmasters had heard that old Huang had refined many pills in the stalactite cave over the years, so they had even more expectations for this reward. If the prize was an elixir, then it would be a huge profit. Teacher, if I may be so bold as to ask, what is the reward? President Qi narrowed his eyes and smiled. A round thing, old Huang replied. After hearing old Huang's description, all the principals were even more certain that the prize was a pill. Hence, they began to express their opinions one after another. In order to make it easier for President Qi to tabulate the results, all the headmasters set up a group chat face-to-face and posted their views on the battle in text. Once the results were out, it would be clear who would get the prize. Yi Jiang has comprehended the sword will resonance at such a young age. This kid's swordsmanship is extraordinary. Moreover, when I watched him fight, he was neither arrogant nor rash. His thoughts were clear, and even his explosive power was extremely strong. If student Lotus Sun hadn't sacrificed her spirit sword just now, I'm afraid she would have already triggered the golden light barrier. So what if you have explosive power? As the saying goes, a man can do it 9 times in one night. His explosive power is also very strong, but in the end, there's a limit to it. I don't believe that he can last so long with such explosive power. He was able to break one of student Lotus Sun's spirit swords, and she still has 47 of them. What are you going to use to fight her? I bet student Lotus Sun will win. On this side, the headmasters began to argue fiercely about the outcome of the second round of the duel. The heat on the real arena was even more intense than that of the headmasters in the command center. Zhu Hanyan was defeated. He sat cross-legged next to Super Chin, bruises all over his body. Although he looked badly injured, they were just superficial wounds. Earlier, the Special Forces teacher had wanted to take Zhu Hanyan away from the scene for treatment, but Nan Yixio had politely refused. After Zhu Hanyan's repeated pleas, the command center finally agreed to let him stay on the scene. Of course, Zhu Hanyan couldn't cause trouble, or the consequences would be very serious. Zhu Hanyan had already thought it through. If he couldn't observe and learn from this pinnacle duel below the Golden Core stage, he would probably regret it for the rest of his life. Zhu Hanyan smiled and asked Super Chin next to him, "Who do you think will win?" "I'll always support student Lotus Sun." Super Chen's expression was very relaxed. "Can't you analyze it from your personal feelings?" "I think Yi Jiang will win." The corners of Zhu Hanyan's mouth twitched. He started to regret asking Super Chin this question. He then turned to look at Nan Yixio next to him. "Brother Nan, what do you think?" There was clearly no point in asking the people from number 60 high in this situation. Even if they knew that Yi Jiang was very strong, they would still choose to support their captain. "I think Yi Jiang will win." Great minds think alike. Their gazes met, and Zhu Hanyan immediately analyzed the next match. If Yi Jiang advances to the next round, there's a high chance that you'll fight him. If I lose to Yi Jiang, I'll accept it wholeheartedly. Nan Yixio smiled bitterly. On the side, Super Chin wasn't happy when he heard this. What did he mean by, if Yi Jiang advances to the next round, there's a high chance that Nan Yixio will fight him? Wasn't that assuming that Wang Ling had already lost to Nan Yixio? Thus, a lot of people from number 60 high cast disdainful looks at him. As the president of Wang Ling's fan club, Xia Ming was the first to step forward. "Student Nan Yixio is a little overconfident. Why do you assume that student Wang Ling will lose to you?" Nan Yixio chuckled. "To be honest, the gap in their battle strength is indeed very obvious." Super Chin also chuckled. "Then to be honest, the gap in luck is also very obvious. Our school's mascot lives up to his reputation. I don't think you'll win." These were sincere words from the bottom of Super Chen's heart, and didn't contain any utilitarian elements. For some reason, from the moment Nan Yixio had drawn his match against Wang Ling, Super Chen had felt at ease. He felt that if it was Wang Ling, there might be a chance that he could win by a surprise move. Although, as Nan Ishio said, there might really be a gap in their battle strength, Super Chin was willing to believe in Wang Ling. At this point in the argument, after Lotus Sun switched to a clone spirit sword, the battle with Yi Jiang finally resumed. Since the other party could freely use sword intent in any part of his body, it was clear that he would be the one to suffer in a direct confrontation. At that moment, Lotus Sun changed her way of thinking. The girl was still dressed in a gorgeous azure blue dress. With a soft cry, she spread out her left hand, and another azure spirit sword appeared in her hand. This was the third mysterious sea. She can even use two swords? On the other side of the battle, Yi Jiang's pupils contracted slightly. In his view, even if Lotus Sun used two swords, it wouldn't be of any use. One more sword meant one more sword to break. In Yi Jiang's eyes, this clone mysterious sea was as brittle as a piece of ice. Chapter 1207. Yi Jiang crossed his arms, a proud and aloof expression in his eyes. The moment Lotus Sun stood still, an invisible wave spread out from Yi Jiang's body. When Lotus Sun slashed out with Mysterious Sea's sword Qi, she realized that it actually couldn't pierce the defense of this Qi membrane around Yi Jiang. The other party had actually used the power of the resonance of sword intent on his Qi, which he then used to build a barrier with himself as the center, forming a 3-foot sword intent barrier that was like a Qi membrane. This barrier was extremely tough, and could block almost all close-range and flying spells. If they were unable to break through this layer of sword intent barrier, then all of their attacks would be like ice crashing into a raging flame, completely melting away. The situation was unfavorable for Lotus Sunday. Even if she brandished her two swords and could control two mysterious seas at the same time, compared with Yang Li's ferocious attack, she was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Yi Jiang was indeed a very strong opponent. It had been a long time since Lotus Sun had encountered a strong enemy below the Golden Core stage. Although the situation looked difficult, the girl's expression from beginning to end didn't show the slightest hint of fear. She wasn't just the captain of No. 60 High's delegation, but also the future heir to Huagua Water Curtain Group. Countless experts in the cultivation world were watching this match. If she lost this fight, it might affect the group's stock market to some extent. This was the so-called pressure of the rich. The school's honor and the family's honor. The double pressure now rested on Lotus Sun's shoulders. The next moment, she brandished the two swords in her hands and drew beautiful arcs in the air. For a moment, everyone's minds were in turmoil, and many of them realized for the first time that this girl actually had an outstanding foundation in martial arts. She brandished her swords like a graceful swan, or like she was dancing a noble waltz. Finally, as she spun rapidly, Mysterious Seas gave off the aura of the boundless ocean, and a waterspout infused with sword intent moved at high speed in Yi Jiang's direction. Countless gravel on the ground was sucked up by the waterspout, and the scene was like the descent of a disaster with earth-shattering momentum. Seeing this, Yi Jiang didn't hold back at all. With a backhand move and Yang Li's Apollo chariot, he didn't give Lotus Sun any chance at all. The golden flaming chariot faced the waterspout with the momentum of a tempestuous wave, and everyone around, including the headmasters, marveled at the sight. Even a battle between Golden Core cultivators might not be able to reach this level. It was hard to imagine that this was a duel between Foundation establishment cultivators. I'm afraid this is a fight between deities below the Golden Core stage. I already said that children nowadays are overnourished. They haven't even reached the Gold Core stage, yet they already have such psionic energy. Logically speaking, only cultivators above the Golden Core stage who possess sufficient spiritual energy can cast a level 3 spell. The two of them are actually using tier 3 spells to clash against each other. This is a little too ridiculous. A headmaster was astonished. Thinking back to the spiritual energy I possessed when I was in the building foundation stage, being able to release level 2 spiritual energy was already considered excellent. The children nowadays are too well nourished. It seems that the standards of the cult of future generations will have to be raised. The chariot collided with the waterspout, causing a huge explosion. The surrounding spectators were unlucky. and many of them were sent flying by the shockwave. They could only blame themselves for being too close. Although they wanted to save some spiritual power, they couldn't afford to set up a protective barrier at this moment. Tang Jingze, Hirogua, and Li Yue reacted quickly and used a protective barrier to withstand the impact. Yan Xiaoqun used the innate advantage of the Titan art to stay where she was. Although she wasn't sent flying by the shockwave, she was only slightly injured because she was too close to the explosion. She was already very lucky that she hadn't triggered the protective golden light. The most unlucky one was Four Eyes from South Sea Sky. His reaction speed was too slow, and he was too close to the explosion. He hadn't been able to dodge in time, and had been forced to activate the protective golden talisman. I knew it was good to be classmate Wang Ling's fan. I didn't even have to do anything, and I already won. Xiaoming was very excited. Wang Ling. Xiaoming had already realized that Yi Jiang and Lotus Sun might make a big move in the second round of attacks, so he had kept a certain distance from them before they started fighting, so he hadn't been affected by any of the shockwaves. So to sum up, the most sullen people were still the two from South Sea Sky, Nan Yixio and Four Eyes. Although Four Eyes' strength was mediocre, he could still be considered a fighting force. This author hadn't even bothered to give him a name, and now he had actually become cannon fodder. Now Nan Yixio was even more stressed. But Nan Yixio was still confident that he could defeat Wang Ling. As for Wang Ling, while everyone was quickly reacting to the explosion in front of them, Wang Ling's idea was to take advantage of the shockwaves from the explosion to trigger the protective golden talisman, and withdraw from this boring match as soon as possible. Thus, Wang Ling stood motionless on the spot. As long as he could trigger the protective golden talisman, he would be able to rest early and eat crispy noodle snacks. While this was a good plan, it couldn't stop Lotus Sun from actually paying attention to Wang Ling while fighting Yi Jiang. Seeing that Wang Ling was about to be hit by the shockwaves, Lotus Sun made a prompt decision to throw out another clone Mysterious Sea to help Wang Ling withstand the shockwaves. After that, Lotus Sun was actually a little embarrassed. Classmate Wang Ling, you don't have to thank me. It was the captain's responsibility to protect his team members. Wang Ling. Under everyone's horrified gazes, this chariot versus waterspout drama finally ended in a draw. Lotus Sun had sacrificed a second clone Mysterious Sea, but her expression didn't change at all. The sword spirits of the clone swords were actually emotionless artificial machines. Apart from obeying Lotus Sun's orders, they didn't have any extra emotions. The ones who truly had feelings for Lotus Sun were the twin sword spirits of the original body. But given the current situation, Lotus Sun still didn't seem to have any intention of releasing her true dual sacred sword spirits. Unless the clone swords were completely used up, the twin sword spirits wouldn't go into battle so easily. Yi Jiang naturally noticed this. Classmate Lotus Sun, your clone swords are the most powerful I've ever seen. But you have to understand that the power of the clone swords is limited. Your level 3 spell is very powerful, but without the support of the twin sword spirits, there's no way you can fight me. At this point in the battle, Yi Jiang felt that the girl in front of him still hadn't realized the gap between their battle strengths, and he felt that he could already unleash more power. His foster father and Shifu had previously told him that it was best not to use this move unless it was absolutely necessary. Otherwise it would be easy to expose certain things. But now, with so many people watching the match, Yi Jiang already felt that he couldn't care less. He enjoyed the shocked and adoring gazes of the people around him, and the atmosphere of this showdown between the strongest cultivators below the golden core stage. In the next moment, Yi Jiang's aura surged again, and strands of golden red sword chi began to boil on the surface of his body. Even his hair was dyed a dazzling gold like the sun. This person had actually even mastered General Yi's boundless sword Dao. At that moment, Wang Ling's eyebrows finally twitched slightly. He finally understood why Yi Jiang was confident that he was invincible below the golden core stage. With the boundless sword Dao, a secret technique that shouldn't be mastered by a foundation establishment cultivator, Yi Jiang could naturally call himself invincible. But this also meant that Lotus Sun was in danger. Wang Ling had personally experienced the power of the boundless sword Dao when he had watched General Yi and the head of state face off. Given the power of that sword chi, Lotus Sun might be seriously injured even with the protective golden light. Looking at the scene in front of him, Wang Ling sighed inwardly. He hadn't wanted to make a move. But now, it seemed that he needed to help Lotus Sun in secret. The appearance of the boundless sword Dao had already broken the balance a little. As an expert in the field of checks and balances and a master of average scores, the moment Wang Ling saw this scene, he was already thinking of ways to help Lotus Sunday. Chapter 1208. The moment Yi Jiang unleashed boundless sword Dao, the hearts of Lotus Sun's supporters turned cold. Many headmasters rubbed their eyes to make sure they weren't seeing things. A foundation establishment kid had actually learned Blade Master's boundless sword Dao. No wonder he could become General Yi's adopted son. This kind of swordsmanship talent was truly rare in the world. I'm afraid student Lotus Sun is going to lose. Looking at the scene in front of them, several headmasters immediately felt that the outcome was a foregone conclusion. Boundless sword Dao was a technique that could infinitely activate a swordsman's limitless potential. Even though Yi Jiang had only cultivated it to a rudimentary level, it was still frightening. His surging sword chi and surging aura had the power of MT Tai crushing down on them. And when it erupted, several people were instantly forced to activate their protective golden talismans. Super Chun, who had already been injured, was affected and directly eliminated. On the other side, the girl duo, Yin Xiaochun and Li Yuyue, were even worse off. They had clearly kept their distance from the battlefield, but were still affected by the impact and had been forced to activate their golden talismans. How could this be? Seeing his only remaining junior sister eliminated, Zhu Hanyun almost fainted on the spot. With the support of boundless sword Dao, the power of the resonance of sword intent was further amplified. In other words, at that moment, the sword chi around Yi Jiang had also greatly increased. The sword barrier that had originally been only a few feet wide had expanded to dozens of feet, and he was now able to launch an indiscriminate attack on the spot. Fortunately, Lotus Sun reacted quickly and sacrificed 3 clone swords to protect the 3 boys closest to her. Li Yuyue was the only one she couldn't protect, because she was too far away and Lotus Sun didn't have time to sacrifice her swords to protect herself. As for Nan Yixio and Tang Jingze, they reacted quickly and were very smart. When they saw that something was wrong, they immediately used their homemade levitation talismans to save their lives. The fluctuations of sword chi were certainly frightening, but in the end, they were affecting the ground. As long as they kept a certain distance from the ground, they could avoid the impact of the shock wave. Nan Yixio still remembered his duel with Wang Ling. It was just a mere levitation talisman. If he used it, then so be it. When the time came, as long as he beat Wang Ling, even if he couldn't beat Yi Jiang, he could at least win second place for South Sea Sky High School. Student Lotus Sun has already used up 5 clone swords. Tang Jingze's expression was calm as he sighed in his heart at Huaguo Water Curtain Group's financial resources. AI, classmate Wang Ling really has a good life. But so what? You'll still lose to me in the end. Although the consumption of the clone sword seemed easy, in reality, the value of each clone sword was extremely high. Sacrificing her sword to protect her teammate was enough to prove her determination in the competition. Therefore, even though the outcome of this battle seemed to have been decided in the eyes of the outside world, in Tang Jingze's eyes, it was still hard to say who would win or lose. The most important reason was, although Yi Jiang had used the amplification power of his boundless sword Dao to eliminate a few people, in the end, it was still Lotus Sun who was fighting him. At such a close distance, Lotus Sun had only used her sword to protect her teammates, but hadn't used the clone sword on herself. In other words, Lotus Sun had withstood the pressure of the sword chi. Why did this happen? For a moment, many people fell into deep thought. In the end, it was because of the nature of the sword spirits. It was true that Yi Jiang's Li Yang sword intent was fierce, but Lotus Sun's mysterious sea was a gentle water sword spirit. It had the power to move 1,000 caddies with little effort. When her fist struck the surface of the water, it might cause ripples, but it might not be able to harm the water. After becoming one with the sword, Mysterious Sea had attached itself to the girl's body, and the azure dress it had transformed into was the best protective halo. Lotus Sun's slender body swayed slightly. Although Yang's sword intent hadn't triggered her protective golden talisman, it had still caused her internal injuries. The girl raised her hand to wipe the blood from the corner of her mouth, her expression full of joy. A showdown between geniuses was bound to be one in which heroes appreciated each other, especially when neither side was willing to admit defeat, which made the match even more interesting to watch. Under countless gazes, Lotus Sun took a deep breath. She then unfurled her sleeves, and one clone mysterious sea after another was taken out of her sword spirit space. When the remaining 40 clone mysterious sea hovered around Lotus Sun, everyone suddenly understood her strategy. Since quality couldn't be guaranteed, then she would use quantity to win. This was undoubtedly a huge gamble. However, everyone was still skeptical about whether the girl had the ability to manipulate 40 spirit swords at the same time. Wang Ling was watching in the dark. If he was going to make a move, he couldn't make it too obvious. The boundless sword Dao was too strong. Given the gap in their battle strength, if he helped Lotus Sun turn the situation around, she would definitely be questioned. What he needed to do was to adapt to the situation, wait for the right opportunity, and then operate under the table. While protecting Lotus Sun, he would do his best to ensure that the two of them fought to a draw. This was the best of both worlds he could think of. Just manipulating 40 spirit swords would consume a huge amount of spirit energy and mental strength. Wang Ling could already see that Lotus Sun's forehead was steaming, which was a sign that her mental strength was too concentrated. It was like the overheating effect of a computer running multiple programs at the same time. Once it reached a state where it couldn't bear the load, it was bound to lag. That would be the time for Yang to subdue the enemy. Hence, a lot of people had been skeptical about whether Lotus Sun could truly control the swords at the start. But reality proved that a genius's ability to control them was beyond everyone's imagination. In the next moment, the 40 clone mysterious sea turned into a meteor shower of swords that soared into the sky, dragging brilliant rainbows behind them. In the air, they arranged themselves in a sword array according to Lotus Sun's will, constantly changing positions as they bombarded Yang with overwhelming force. Yang's arms were crossed the whole time, and he maintained a cold and aloof posture. The Yangli sword spirit behind him emitted a holy light like that of the bright sun, which scorched the surrounding air. The rising temperature made everyone nearby feel like the air was boiling hot. The heat could be felt from a long distance away, and the temperature at the center was absolutely frighteningly high. Is he trying to raise the temperature to melt those clone mysterious sea swords? Someone said. While the temperature at the center was extremely high, it was still a fool's dream to think that he could melt the clone swords. Yang was like a small sun, but he was never able to reach the temperature of a true sun. So the other party's real goal definitely wasn't to melt the mysterious sea swords, but to make Lotus Sun overload herself in advance. In order to manipulate the 40 spirit swords, Lotus Sun's body temperature had already risen. As long as Yang added a little more firewood, she would definitely overload herself. Although such a method was shameless, it could still be regarded as a safe strategy and tactic. It was impossible for Lotus Sun not to see through this crafty plan. She knew that she couldn't drag it out any longer. This wave of 40 mysterious sea swords was her final all-out attack. 5-card stud. In the end, such a desperate effort would naturally result in both sides suffering. And it was very obvious that Lotus Sun's injuries would be even more serious. When Wang Ling made a battle simulation based on the scene in front of him, he could already see the result. This couldn't go on. And so, the moment Lotus Sun's 40 clone mysterious sea swords were about to collide with Yang, he switched to his king's eye. In the space of a single breath, time in the entire universe paused for a brief moment. During this pause, he did 3 things. The first was to use a cooling spell to cool down Lotus Sun's body. The second was to adjust the positions of the 40 clone mysterious sea swords. The third was to aim some of the swords at Yang's, but this sword chi barrier seemed flawless, but in fact, it also had a weak point. And Yang's weak point was this tailbone. Chapter 1209. Wang Ling didn't use the universal time stop ability very often. He had comprehended this ability when he was 12 years old. The reason he didn't use it often was that it was a huge burden on the king's eye. The main damage was temporary dryness of the eyes, which required several drops of eye drops to recover. The key was that after using it, there would also be some problems with his vision. Time would pause for 1 second, and the degree would temporarily increase by 10 degrees. Thus, he would do his best to finish what he had to do while time was paused. After everything was set up, he withdrew his time-stop power. Victory or defeat in a battle often depended on the details. When the wheel of time started to roll again, there was a clear look of astonishment on Yi Jiang's face. When on Earth, he could already feel 4 clone mysterious Cs aimed at his butt. They clearly hadn't been there before. He didn't know when they had suddenly appeared behind him. His tailbone was his life gate, and his butt was the weakest part of the sword chi barrier. He hadn't expected Lotus Sun to be able to do this in such a tense moment. Not only had she seen through his life gate, she had even launched an extremely precise attack. The distance was too short, and it was already too late to rebuild his defense. At the last moment, as the 4 clone mysterious Cs pierced through his rear defense, Yi Jiang's life gate was broken. Like a broken balloon, the sword chi all over his body poured out in torrents with the momentum of a landslide and a tsunami. For a moment, it formed a terrifying wave of sword intent that broke the dam in all directions. Seeing that the situation wasn't good, Lotus Sun had the rest of the clone mysterious Cs protect all the members of number 60 high school, while she alone took the lead. But the power of the wave of sword intent was too strong, and her clone mysterious Cs shattered like dominoes. When the last clone mysterious C shattered, Lotus Sun's entire body was sent flying by the wave of sword intent. Almost at the same time, Yi Jiang and Lotus Sun's protective golden talismans were triggered, and they perished together. It's actually a draw. A lot of people looked at this scene in disbelief. All the headmasters in the command center were deathly silent. Yi Jiang had already used a killer move like Boundless Sword Dao, but he had still managed to tie with Lotus Sunday. The headmasters who had been on Yi Jiang's side earlier all lowered their heads and fell silent. This was indeed a showdown at the peak of the Golden Core stage, and Yi Jiang was terrifyingly strong. When the Limitless Sword Dao was activated, he could even fight against a Golden Core cultivator. And Lotus Sun's strategic planning and insight were even more astonishing. Even when she was at a disadvantage, she could still accurately find an opportunity to reverse the situation. Although the final result was a draw, in fact, in the eyes of many principals present, the winner was very obvious. After being sent flying, Lotus Sun fell into a coma. The protective golden talisman would only automatically activate when a person's life was in danger. Just now, the girl had shielded the front on her own to protect the other people from number 60 high, and had relied on the remaining mysterious cloning C to disperse the enormous pressure brought on by the tide of sword intent. However, in the end he still failed to protect his golden protective talisman. After secretly examining Lotus Sun, Wang Ling heaved a secret sigh of relief. Although he had fallen into a coma, his injuries were not serious. He had only suffered some minor internal injuries. On the other hand, Yi Jiang was the one who really needed to be concerned about. If Lotus Sun had been standing on the edge of the storm of surging sword intent just now, then Yi Jiang was the person at the center of the storm. A large amount of sword intent had poured out of his tailbone, causing his protective golden talisman to activate, and he had fallen to the ground with his butt sticking up in the air. His posture was too graceful, and the scene was a mess. Compared with the girl who had fallen like a water lily, Yi Jiang on the other side was more like a chrysanthemum in full bloom. Your chrysanthemum is broken, the ground is covered in wounds, your smile is already yellow. Hero Guo couldn't help sighing. This was the worst draw he had ever seen. It was clearly a draw, but it looked like Lotus Sun had won a complete victory. The way she had fallen was too different. Furthermore, Yi Jiang's current situation was the kind that couldn't be broadcasted without mosaics. Members of the resident special forces quickly rushed over to check on Yi Jiang's initial injuries. They saw his snow-white butt sticking up in the air, and half his head buried in the ground. The rescue team first exposed Yi Jiang's face, but didn't move him from his embarrassing position, because they weren't sure if Yi Jiang's bones were fractured. If there were internal fractures, casually turning him over at this time could cause him a second injury. Has the scene been cut off? It has. That's too pitiful. It's clearly a draw. Stop talking, let's examine him first. The team members used their magic treasures to conduct a comprehensive appraisal and examination of Yi Jiang's injuries. His upper body is basically fine, but his lower body is a little tragic. His pelvis and leg bones are fractured. Also, his anus is ruptured. The rescue team member spoke very quietly, but Superchin still heard him. Standing on the side, Superchin smiled. Oh, it's ruptured. Then why isn't there any blood? As soon as he said this, blood sprayed out of Yi Jiang's but like a fountain. Seeing this, the rescue team member sighed in his heart. When a landslide happened, no blood was innocent. Roughly 10 minutes later, the scene returned to normal, and Yi Jiang and Lotus Sun were both picked up by members of the special forces. Thus, only Tang Jingze, Hirogua, Nan Yixio and Wang Ling were left. Lotus Sun was number 60 high school's biggest backer. Being eliminated along with Yi Jiang was the most ideal result that Nan Yixio could think of. In terms of overall combat strength, Nan Yixio was absolutely confident that he could win against the remaining 3 people. After all, he was the captain of South Sea Sky High. The only one who might be a little harder to deal with was number 59 high school's Tang Jingze. But so what? That Hirogua wasn't a pushover. After the fight between Tang Jingze and Hirogua, no matter who won, the winner would definitely suffer losses. But his fight with Wang Ling would be effortless. Thus, before the third round of the match began, Nan Yixio looked at Wang Ling as if victory was already in his grasp. Classmate Wang Ling, it's our turn in the next round. Do you have anything to say? Wang Ling. Preparation time passed quickly, and the duel between Nan Yixio and Wang Ling officially began. After the third round of immortals fighting below the Golden Core stage, this duel seemed a little dull. South Sea Sky High was a school famous for its perception-type magic, so no one expected Nan Yixio to be able to show off in battle. As for Wang Ling on the other side, he was just a mascot, and there didn't seem to be much to talk about. Thus, despite everyone's pessimism, Wang Ling calmly put his hands in the pockets of his school pants and unhurriedly walked onto the duel stage. He was pondering a very serious question. What kind of spell could he use to not kill Nan Yixio and still win this match in a low-key manner? Chapter 12:10. Nan Yixio's failure was unexpected, but reasonable. When they saw the mushroom cloud explode, all the headmasters in the command center couldn't help looking at number 60 High's spicy man. From the very beginning, this headmaster Chun from number 60 high school had already made clear plans for Nan Yixio. Thank you everyone. Huagua Water Curtain Group had already invested in the construction of our school's playground, and construction would start in the near future. So let's take a discount. I hope that everyone who has just made a promise will not go back on their word. Headmaster Chin smiled lightly. Although he was looked down upon by the surrounding headmasters, he was undoubtedly the biggest winner in this situation. He did not want Bai Lian. The headmasters were furious, but they didn't dare say anything. The most important thing was that Old Huang and President Qi were present as witnesses, so they had no choice but to fulfill their promise back then. Since he had lost, there was no harm in being more magnanimous. Otherwise, he would be labeled as someone who did not keep his word. As for the reward that Old Huang had mentioned earlier, that round object piqued the curiosity of many people. Do you still remember Old Huang's promise? Headmaster Chen didn't stand on ceremony. Yes, I still have that round thing with me. Under everyone's curious gaze, Old Huang took out a shiny object and tossed it to Headmaster Chen. Coins. An ancient coin. I found it while I was cultivating in the stalactite cave. What history? Someone asked. I'm not sure. Old Huang shook his head. What does that imply? Go to Bilibili and pay for the Immortal King anime. On the other side of the scene, Nan Yixio walked out of the dust caused by the explosion. He was covered in dust and dirt. The explosion of the talisman was just right. The light film triggered by the protective golden light protected his body very well. He didn't lose an arm or leg. However, the outcome was hard for Nan Ishio to accept. He couldn't believe that he had lost to a mascot. Obviously, he hadn't even exchanged one move with Wang Ling. And he had already lost just like that? At this point, number 60 High's victory seemed certain. Number 60 High still had Hero Guo, Wang Ling and Xiaoming on the field. On the other side, only number 59 High School's Tang Jingze was left. Unless Tang Jingze could mount a counterattack and achieve a 1-on-3, number 60 High's victory was already set in stone. 1 against 3, how could it be easy? Even if he could win one round, Tang Jingze wouldn't be able to endure the physical exhaustion of taking turns to fight. Just as Hero Guo was warming up and planning to fight Tang Jingze, he heard Tang Jingze say, "Well, I admit defeat. Number 60 High won this match." Right now, it was a meaningless battle. Tang Jingze felt that even if he fought, he might not be able to win. He might as well save some strength and pick up second place. This choice might seem a little cowardly, but it was in fact a wise one. The main thing was that number 59 High School's team was in a more desperate situation. As the team leader, if Tang Jingze was injured at this time, everyone in number 59 High School would have to be carried back. You're giving up? Hero Guo couldn't believe that Tang Jingze would actually make such a decision. This is my decision. And the truth was that even if I won the next 3 matches, my overall score might not be higher than number 60 High's. Otherwise, I would definitely give it my all. Tang Jingze's voice was very heavy. He also wanted to finish the last match, but the situation in front of him was that he would lose sooner or later. Number 59 High School's overall score wasn't high to begin with. Even if they won 3 matches, there would still be a gap between them and number 60 High School. The nature of the national competition was based on a point system. Those who survived to the end would get bonus points, but they might not necessarily be the winner. If their overall score in the first few days was high enough, it was still possible for them to turn defeat into victory. How do you know your overall score isn't as high as ours? Hero Guo was stunned. I caught a teacher from the Special Forces on patrol earlier, and asked him about the situation in each team. Tang Jingze sighed as he spoke. Your number 60 High School's overall score is very high. Just the bonus points for the essay alone are over 300 points. Bonus points for the essay? Hero Guo was stunned. It's the diary for the body technique competition. Everyone can decide whether or not they want to write the essay on the topic. Student Wang Ling's essay called Substitute got more than 200 points. After Tang Jingze said this, everyone present, including Wang Ling and all the headmasters in the command center, were shocked. All of them had incredulous expressions on their faces. The hell? More than 200 points for an essay. What the F***K was there left to play? The main reason why Wang Ling was astonished was because he hadn't written the essay at all. He had been fighting with Wang Ying while he had been writing the essay. So this essay had been written by his clone, Crispy Noodles. Although Wang Ling had known early on that Crispy Noodles was an honest person, he had never thought that he would actually be able to write an essay with more than 200 points. At that moment, Wang Ling sucked in a cold breath. He felt more and more gazes focus on him, and cold sweat instantly soaked his back. Thus, only Tang Jingze was left sighing. As a new fan of Wang Ling, his admiration for Wang Ling at that moment was even greater than before he had participated in the competition. Tang Jingze. Student Wang Ling, as expected of you. You got first place with your essay. Wang Ling. On the other side, the headmasters in the command center were having none of it. More than 200 points for an essay? What kind of essay could be so attractive? Shady. Blatant shady business. I strongly demand that this essay be made public for everyone to appreciate. Many headmasters openly protested. Calm down, everyone. I've already ordered for the essays to be shown. All the essays written by the students during the competition have been cross-evaluated and graded by gold medal Chinese teachers, selected from the National Database of Outstanding Teachers. The system will randomly select the teachers, so it stands to reason that there shouldn't be any shady business, President Chi said. Dozens of seconds later, Wang Ling's substitute essay written by Crispy Noodles was publicly displayed on the screen in the background library. What greeted their eyes was a large number of wavy underlined lines that the Chinese teacher had helped to annotate. All the headmasters were utterly shocked. The entire essay was actually full of golden lines. When a speck of dust falls on a man's head, it becomes a mountain. Nature's warning is clearly deafening, but we pretend to be deaf and dumb, go with the flow, and even add fuel to the fire. We think we dominate the world and can be the masters, but we don't know who has become whose substitute. You can't sing winter as the beginning of spring. Some people are already buried in winter, and some people should be buried in winter. Seeing this, all the headmasters were stupefied. They were stunned by Wang Ling's outstanding writing style, and the profound philosophical meaning behind his words. Although some of them didn't understand the deeper meaning expressed inside, they felt that it was very impressive. P.S. This chapter is free to read. 3 of the 4 sentences at the end are quotes from a Chinese teacher's opening speech at Chengdu No. 7 High School. Article. This screen may change fate. Chapter 12:11. On Sunday, November 22nd, the 9th day of the National Cultivation School Body Technique Competition, students from hundreds of schools all over the country gathered in neat square formations in the square of Nine Dragon Mountain Base. It could be seen that compared to the beginning, the delegations sent by each school were basically fewer people. Some students who suffered from fractures or other more serious injuries during the competition could be exempted from participating in the closing ceremony after being reported by the teacher leading the team. Yi Jiyang and Lotus Sun hadn't come. In fact, Lotus Sun had already woken up earlier, but that old man Sun from Huaguo Water Curtain Group had been worried, and had taken her back overnight for a more detailed examination. All in all, this National Body Technique competition finally drew to a close with No. 60 High's one-sided team performance. A lot of people sighed in their hearts at the dramatic nature of the competition. At the same time, a lot of people had pent-up resentment in their hearts. Before the competition had started, no one had thought that No. 60 High would end up with a big lead over the other teams in the form of bonus points for essays. What happened to the body technique exchange competition? Wang Ling thought of the spirit sword competition with No. 59 High School. They hadn't had many opportunities to display their spirit swords at all, and no one had expected the same mistake to repeat itself in the National Body Technique competition this time. As expected, life was a circle. But it wasn't as if there hadn't been any exciting fights in the competition. For example, the showdown between Yi Jiyang and Lotus Sun at the peak of the Golden Core stage could be taken out and scrutinized again and again. On the sports field, Wang Ling looked around out of the corner of his eye and noticed that a lot of people were watching him. He knew in his heart that the reason he was the focus of so much attention wasn't because of his battle with Nan Yixio, but because of the essay written by his real clone Crispy Noodles, after the competition which had made him popular. Who knew things would turn out like this? Wang Ling sighed helplessly. On the way back to Songhai City on the Air Immortal warship, Wang Ling was worried about one thing, and that was whether Father Wang would find an excuse to dock his allowance. He had stirred up too much trouble in this national competition, and now the whole school, no, the whole alliance of 10,000 schools knew that he was a good writer. Fortunately, Ajwa knew that Wang Ling had always liked to keep a low profile, and didn't like to draw attention to himself. Thus, Ajwa had already spread the word that Wang Ling's composition this time was just a flash in the pan. When it came to writing an essay, even if there were no mistakes in the choice of words and sentences, it was still largely dependent on inspiration and luck. A person could not guarantee that he would always be able to write a golden sentence. Sometimes, when he suddenly thought of an awesome sentence, it was really just a sudden burst of inspiration. But he didn't know how many people would accept this. In any case, on the way back, everyone on the Air Immortal warship was filled with admiration for Wang Ling, especially Tang Jingze, who could almost be described as prostrating himself on the ground. Classmate Wang Ling, your composition is amazing. He's practically a modern-day Lu Shuren. Tang Jingze savored the sentences in the essay. What he liked the most was that sentence, a speck of dust from an era, when it falls on a person's head, is like a mountain. What kind of literary talent did he have to write such a great sentence? Incredible, incredible. No one was more excited than Wang Ling's language teacher, Guan Ziqian. Teacher Guan was a very low-key person, and usually didn't show his face. He was a very low-key office worker, and of course, there was nothing to say about his professional ability. All along, Guan Ziqian had been quite critical of Wang Ling's essays. It wasn't that Wang Ling's writing wasn't good, but that it was too plain. It was like a running account, and even the arguments were very old-fashioned. Wang Ling's essay could barely be considered above a passing grade, but this kind of essay would never get a high score. Thus, when this essay called Substitute was exposed in the national competition, Teacher Guan, who usually didn't say much in the group, actually directly at Wang Ling, have you finally figured it out? Teacher Guan sent a face bomb emoji. Why do I feel like your essay is ghostwritten? Looking at Teacher Guan's question in the class group, Wang Ling thought about it for a long time before he trembled and replied with 2 words. No. To be honest, when he typed these 2 words on the screen, Wang Ling felt guilty. Seeing his reply, Teacher Guan didn't stand on ceremony, and directly retorted in the group. Then what's with your usual essays? Are you playing me? He hit the nail on the head. Wang Ling was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. Fortunately, Old Antique came out in time to smooth things over for Wang Ling. Student Wang Ling belongs to the category of contestants who occasionally perform well in competitions. Teacher Guan, don't be so calculative. Seeing Wang Ling's pitiful appearance as he held his phone, Old Antique's heart ached a little. Look at how scared this child is. Naturally, Teacher Guan was joking. His students had written such an excellent essay in a national competition, and he was very happy in his heart. He didn't type anymore, and directly praised Wang Ling in the group by voice message. Wang Ling, this is enough to show that you actually have literary talent and potential. I suspect that you were too nervous when you wrote your essay before because you didn't have enough time. If you were given enough time, even if you didn't perform as well as you did this time, you would at least be above average or even above average. Wang Ling still didn't have the guts to reply. The reason was that he felt that Teacher Guan was implying something. Sure enough, Teacher Guan's next words were, Wang Ling, there's a district essay competition in the middle of next month. Our language team teachers have been discussing for a long time who our school should send. How about you? Wang Ling. Teacher Guan. This time it was all thanks to your essay that our school won the national competition. I don't think the other language team teachers have any objections. People are forced to be like this. Since you have potential, you should give yourself the right amount of pressure, understand? I'm doing this for your own good. Wang Ling. He knew things would turn out like this. It was already afternoon by the time he returned to number 60 High Sports Field on the Sky Immortal warship. Wang Ling was about to go home when he heard someone shouting on the road. A speck of ashes of the times. A speck of ashes of the times. Wang Ling turned his head, and unexpectedly saw a passerby looking at him in high spirits. It was a middle-aged woman who was taking her daughter home from school. Judging from the girl's clothes, she was probably from Qingyan First Primary School, which was a cultivation primary school near number 60 High. Do you see that, big brother? A speck of ashes of the times. The middle-aged woman crouched down and said excitedly to her daughter. She had forgotten what Wang Ling's name was, but had still given him a unique nickname based on his essay. That was a speck of ashes of the times. You have to learn from that big brother. His essays are very good. The middle-aged woman was very excited. Mom, that big brother is eating crispy noodle snacks. The little girl pointed at Wang Ling. Let's go. Let's go buy it too. Eat it. Maybe your dog's hit essay will be as good as his. The middle-aged woman was even more excited. The corner of Wang Ling's mouth twitched. It looked like he was really famous this time. Even his noodles were starting to be snatched away. Chapter 12:12. Tomorrow was Monday, but Wang Ling didn't have to go to school. Headmaster Chen had taken into account the delegation's circumstances and had given it 2 days off. After all, they had won glory for the school. Some of them hadn't fully recovered yet, and if they returned to school seamlessly, it would only cause more pressure. So on Monday and Tuesday, as long as they were members of number 60 High's delegation, they could complete their homework at home. The teachers would record the class videos and send them to the class group chat for the students to study at home. Contrary to Wang Ling's expectations, when he got home, Father Wang didn't scold him for the composition, but instead smiled. Wang Ling wasn't used to this. "What are you afraid of? Sit down, I won't cut your pocket money." Father Wang patted the empty seat next to the sofa. "Your composition is pretty good." He then started to praise Wang Ling. "This shows that you still have our old Wang family's genes." Wang Ling: "Don't worry, I won't blame you. It's fine if you stand out. When it comes to composition, sometimes inspiration just flashes in the pan, and I'm afraid you can't control that well." Father Wang stared at Wang Ling and sked, then reached out to stroke his shoulder. "Through this competition, I've gotten to know you better, son." Wang Ling still didn't dare speak, mainly because he felt that Father Wang's words seemed to have a deeper meaning. "In the future, you can also learn to inherit my mantle. If you're not busy, why don't you help me write? I'll give you 10% of my royalties. Even 10% of my royalties is more than your pocket money." Wang Ling hadn't expected Father Wang to make such a request. Wasn't this just asking for a steal? Furthermore, everyone had their own specialties, and he really hadn't thought about writing a book. After staring blankly for a moment, Father Wang laughed and rubbed Wang Ling's head. "I'm joking. I was just testing you. I still have this bit of professional integrity. Your writing skills are just like writing for an exam. Your father doesn't care about that." Wang Ling sighed in his heart again. Being teased outside and teased by his father at home, he really couldn't live like this. After dinner, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal and Wang Ling spoke on the phone, mainly to talk about settling Li Huanran and Jiang Yingyue. Li Huanran would participate in the public hearing as the main witness of this incident. On the other hand, Jiang Yingyue had some clues about the fake numinous mother, so she also had some value. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal actually wasn't calling Wang Ling, but Loopy Toad. "Brother Ling, this is the current situation. Battle Sect had to help Huaxiao Alliance deal with the aftermath, and couldn't spare any manpower for the time being. Huaxiao Alliance thinks that we need to find the right person to keep an eye on these two. Nothing will happen to Li Huanran, but it's mainly this Jiang Yingyue. It wouldn't be good if something happens to her," Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal said. The Battle Sect, he mentioned, was actually the Office of Strategic Deception. This was a new alias that the Office of Strategic Deception had recently established, which was convenient and more domineering. At the present busy stage, who would watch over Jiang Yingyue seemed to be a problem. Thus, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal's idea was to have Li Huanran and Jiang Yingyue live in Wei Ji's house. Wang Ling broke out in a sweat when he heard this. Wang Zhen and Lu Qingyi were already living in Wei Ji's house. If two more people, a man and a woman at that, were they going to shoot a romantic comedy? But this wasn't an impossible suggestion. First of all, Wang Zhen and Lu Qingyi were on Wang Ling's side. Their main job was to look after the spirit beasts in Wei Ji's villa. After Li Huanran and Jiang Yingyue moved in, not only would they have a place to stay temporarily, the most important thing was that there would be someone to watch over them. Lu Qingyi was a very meticulous person. As long as she was around, it was unlikely that Jiang Yingyue would cause any trouble. In addition, the director of the apartment's neighborhood committee was Battle Saint Marshal Jiang, one of the 10 founding generals, who had retired. With Battle Saint around, Jiang Yingyue probably wouldn't dare move a muscle, which would be more effective than sending her to prison. So this was indeed a feasible plan. Furthermore, Wei Ji's apartment was big enough to house more than a dozen spirit beasts, let alone 2 more people. But in the end, this still required Wei Ji's approval. After the conversation was over, Loopy Toad, who had been crouching on the side and listening for a long time, finally understood that Grenade-throwing's call was actually for Wang Ling. Everyone knew that it had a pretty good relationship with Wei Ji, and was one of the few friends Loopy Toad had made while it had been cultivating on Earth. Loopy Toad replied, "It won't be difficult, I just need to give him a heads up." "Thank you, Brother Dog." Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal smiled brightly. "Also, are you investigating the matter of the fake numinous mother?" Loopy Toad asked with concern at that moment. We've already done some scouting based on the clues Jiang Yinghua provided. We should have some news in a few days. With that, the call ended. Wang Ling thought he could finally rest, but in the end, there was a series of messages in their number 60 high school delegation, too, WeChat group. Why was it, too? That was because Lotus Sun wasn't among the members. This group, as well as the messages, had all come from Wang Ling's call with grenade-throwing senior immortal. Someone had set up a new group chat, leaving all the teachers and Lotus Sun outside, and seemed to be secretly plotting something. Wang Ling scrolled up the chat history and skimmed through it several times before he realized that everyone was discussing visiting Lotus Sunday Superchin. Did you find out? What hospital? Hirogwa. My uncle replied. Songhai 7-star First Military Medical Hospital. Xiaming sighed. As expected of classmate Lotus Sun. It's not easy to get into this hospital. Then the question is, who among us is free to visit classmate Lotus Sun tomorrow? Let me say this first, I actually really want to go, but the problem is that after the competition, my mom wants to take me out for a walk. Superchen, walk. Xiaming. It wasn't easy for our school to win first place, and I'm one of the representatives. Shouldn't I go out and show off to our relatives? Hirogwa. Me too, Superchen, +1. Liyue. Me too. By the way, I also made a nutritious bento for classmate Lotus Sun, which can speed up her recovery. Who's free tomorrow? Seeing this, Wang Ling finally couldn't take it anymore. He felt that if he didn't say anything, this matter would most likely fall on him. Just then, Superchen suddenly said, how about this? Those who don't say anything now will form a group to visit Lotus Sun tomorrow. As soon as he said this, Fang Xing, Wang Zhen, Lu Qingyi, Jin Yuan and Gu Xuanji sent a string of smiley faces. Before Wang Ling could send an ellipsis, these people had already finished sending before him. These people were actually all spying on him. Wang Ling. Superchen. Then Wang Ling, you'll go tomorrow. Stop pretending, I know you're also spying on us. Our consolation gifts will be sent to your house at noon tomorrow. Take them to classmate Sun on our behalf. Wang Ling. That you're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.